Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the PROTO GT3 Championship as brought to you on iRacing by NXTGEN Racing. And tonight marks round 6 of the 12-round calendar taking place at the German circuit known only as the Hockenheimring Grand Prix circuit. Of course, tonight being a Friday, that means it is time for a post-round broadcast or a post-race broadcast, and we're taking a look back at all the action that occurred in Lobby 2 earlier this week on Wednesday the 18th of May, but we're bringing you all the action as if it were live tonight, and well, our schedule for tonight is as follows. Times in British Summertime, that's BST or UTC +1. In approximately 14.5 minutes time, so at 8 o'clock this evening, we'll be kicking off with qualifying, the 20-minute session to determine our grid order for the purposes of race number 1. After which, we'll be going straight into the first of our two races, the 15-minute sprint race, race 1 that is, that kicks off at 8:20, and that'll be all in, all out action, and the only strategic element is to get to the front of your respective class and hold on to the lead to the finish. And if you can come home with the fastest lap as well, that's an extra 2 points to go into the kitty. After which, we'll be taking a brief break before returning at approximately 5 to 9 this evening for the build-up to the second of our two races, and that is, of course, the 60-minute feature race, which will take place at 9 o'clock tonight, and that will be the race with the additional strategic element of the mandatory pit stop, where it will be about deciding when to come into the pits. Do you go for the undercut? Do you go to come in right at the midpoint of the race? Or do you go for the overcut versus your peers and try to get the most out of that pit stop and see what you can leverage? Now, of course, this being Lobby 2, it is the case this lobby sponsored by IMB Racewear, and we'll introduce our title sponsor in a short order. But for those tuning in tonight, or if you're looking to tune in, you can tune in via free media platforms for your viewing pleasure. Firstly, if you are a YouTube user, you can go to the NXTGEN Racing official YouTube channel on at youtube.com, and you can tune in there. Alternatively, if you're a Facebook user, you can go to facebook.com/groups/NextGen Racing. Or last but not least, if you are a Twitch user, you can go to twitch.tv/TX141 to tune in on Twitch. And who is TX141? Well, that's me. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain a Spit, and I'll be bringing you all the racing action over the course of tonight's proceedings and indeed over the entirety of the season from start to finish in both Lobby 1 and Lobby 2. And of course, this being Lobby 2, sponsored by IMB Racewear, it's only fair now we introduce our title sponsor for Lobby 2. So who are IMB Racewear, here you ask, and what do they stand for? Well, IMB Racewear delivers racewear for both sim and real life racers, which enables the racer to make the impact they always wanted. What sets IMB Racewear apart from the competition is that racewear prides itself on individuality as it is designed for you by you, meaning that each product is fully customizable unlike your typical off-the-shelf racewear products. Whether you are looking for racing gloves, racing shoes or team clothing, there are no limits to levels of customization available. And if you want to know more and get your hands on your own bespoke racewear, be sure to head to imbracewear.com today for further information. That website, once again, imbracewear.com. And indeed, we're very grateful to be working with IMB Racewear, a long-term sponsor of NextGen Racing Series, not just on iRacing, which is the platform we're racing on tonight, but across other racing platforms as well. And I can definitely recommend on a personal level IMB Racewear. Indeed, still got to get around to ordering my own personalised gloves for sim racing, but IMB Racewear there. Whether you're looking to get team shirts all the way down to individual shoes for yourself, they are the #1 place to go to. And in terms of their contribution to this series, not just as title sponsor, but they're also supporting the running of Lobby 2 and are contributing to the prize pool, in particular to the GT3 driver class prize pool, with a set of custom gloves up for grabs for each of the GT3 class winners, that being in the AM and also the Pro class. And that goes on top of the cash prize pool, which is to be confirmed. And as for the LMP AM drivers, well, they won't have a set of racing gloves available, but they will have a cash prize pool, the value of which to be confirmed at a later date. Now, before we come on to our drivers, it's only fair, and indeed our championship standings, we must talk about the calendar, because we are now at the halfway point in this championship, where tonight it is round number 6. It was the 18th of May when the racing took place, but it's the 20th of May today, and we're at the Hockenheimring in Germany. But preceding that, we started off with a tour of the North American continent. We started all the way back at the beginning of April at Watkins Glen. We then went to the roller coaster ride that is Road Atlanta, before making our way to the Canadian equivalent, which was Motorsport, or the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Then it was Daytona Road Course for the first of our 3 2-hour super endurance rounds, and then we took a week's break before returning last week at the Austrian circuit of the Red Bull Ring, kicking off the series tour of continental Europe. We're of course in Germany tonight, and then after tonight, next week, we'll be going to the Italian Cathedral Speed, that is Monza, the fast circuit, on the 25th of May is when the racing will occur, but the broadcast will be the 27th of May, and then the week after that, we'll be going into round number 8 to have the second of our 3 super endurance rounds, and that will be at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, the legendary circuit, and the racing will be taking place on the 1st of June. After that, we'll be taking another week's break before returning for the final third of the series, and we'll be making a brief visit to the British Isles, particularly the Silverstone circuit located in the United Kingdom, before making our way all the way across the Asia-Pacific region for a visit to Japan, for Suzuka, I should say, and then returning to Germany for the penultimate round at the Nürburgring circuit, I believe the Nürburgring Vedol GP circuit, and then last but not least, we'll be bringing the curtain down with our third and final Super Endurance round, the 2-hour round at Le Mans or Circuit de la Sarthe on what will be the 6th of July when the racing occurs. We'll be bringing you that final broadcast action on the 8th of July. A cracking calendar still awaits us, but my goodness, how time is flying. Indeed, now we're going from the rather grunty and quite brutal American circuits to more fast-flowing technical circuits on the European continent, and we've got plenty to look forward to here tonight. Now, looking forward to things, of course, our drivers, and where would we be if we did not cover the standings going into this round? So, we start off with our LMP2 AM class here, and after the Red Bull Ring, it is the case that Stephan Wessels continues to lead, now on 208 points, and is gradually starting to open up a sizable advantage over second place man Sam Holman. Sam Holman being known as Mr. Consistent, it is the case that normally he's able to achieve very similar results over the course of the racing, and whilst it was the case that Wessels ran away with the majority of the points, and minus the fastest lap in the sprint race, Sam Holman there with a good another 30 points to his name, continuing his crusade. But we have there in P3 the fast charger of Paul Walton, who having missed a couple of rounds earlier on this series, is now here to stay and had a very difficult day at the Red Bull Ring, particularly in the feature race, getting hooked up on the tyre barrier out of turn 1, which saw him lose out on a critical second place. But it is still the case that Britain is charging into the championship standings and is looking to try and move into P2 come the end of tonight. Really has got the pace to take on Wessels, which while those two will score the bigger points tonight, that will be the question. In P4, Michael Price unable to take part last week, and we're hoping for his return in the near future. It may be tonight, or if not tonight, most likely in a week's time, or fingers crossed. I believe he is updating some of his sim racing equipment, and it is the case meanwhile in at P5, Richard Stanton there picking up a good point on 118 points ahead of Paul Scott, a further 8 points behind there. Paul Scott unable to take part in both of the races at the last time out the Red Bull Ring and score points. Baz Meacham, or Barry Meacham in full in P7, we saw him return to the tarmac on 108 points there in P7, and he is only ahead of Jim Stanton on result count back. Paul Williams, not on any more points from the previous round in round number 4, still on 95 points, but we are hearing that the Team Tetra Rouge driver is returning as of tonight, and then P10, a further 3 points down, 92 points. Jack Wyborn there with a dismal day in the feature race at the Red Bull Ring, but able to score some good points in the sprint. Mark Baker having a difficult day in the sprint as well, but a great day in the feature. They're P11, and then Jonathan Collins, last but not least, on 86 points, and looking to close down Mark Baker and Jack Wyborn tonight after what was a good day of racing at the Red Bull Ring for the Britain. Meanwhile, the story in the GT3 Pro class, well, it's slightly different in the fact that you can see the delta between our top two is only 15 points. And it's been swings and roundabouts. It was the case that going into the previous round, it was Jeremy De Boever leading. Going into this round, it's now Lucas Romano leading after a perfect points haul by surprise after quite a disastrous end to what was both the sprint and the feature for Jeremy De Boever. But it is the case that Lucas Romano picking up the perfect points tally, now moving up to 225 points, 15 ahead of his main rival. And will we see the two come to blows again once tonight? Alternatively, will it be the case that D Vlaming, Jeremy De Boever's teammate, will be able to make amends for what was a difficult day in the feature race, where it could have been the case a 1-2 for the team, but a squabble between the two teammates saw them drop down the order, and will Vlaming be able to put some of the demons of the past couple of rounds behind, where he's been off the pace to an extent, and start to close up to the top two? He'll need to do it fast, because Peter Lemkins is closing on 142 points, and Lemkins only 1 point ahead of Dirt Bounce there in P5. Matthew Proughton, unable to take part last time out the Red Bull Ring on 108 points. We look forward to when he does return. Very fast driver in the BMW M4. With Sean Scooter in P7 with a good performance at the Red Bull Ring. He'll be looking to build more momentum tonight. Lambert Wedder on his return after missing a couple rounds. We are very happy to see the Team Racing Netherlands driver picking up a very consistent haul of 34 points, and now ahead of Gus Franken by a single point, who was unable to take part last time out. Meanwhile, in the GT3 AM class, the story at the championship table is one similar to the GT3 Pro Championship. In the fact, we have two runaway rivals at the top. Navarro De Boever continues to lead for challenged by DB2. However, it is the case that he was hauled in to a considerable extent by Tristan Dino Brega last time out, with Dino Brega losing out on some critical points in the feature race due to technical issues, but still getting a good points haul, and that gap between himself and Navarro De Boever now standing at only 19 points. We then do have a sizable gap of 43 points to Arjan Cregwell in P3, who after picking picking up a superb pair of results over the course of the racing, is now starting to emerge as the best of the rest. However, Lorenzo Gualtieri, with technical issues, unable to take part and complete the races last time out at the Red Bull Ring. You can imagine that Gualtieri will be looking to come back strong tonight in the hunt for P3, with Mark Sykes only a further 4 points behind, and then Davide Varvo in at P6, a further point off. James Slate's a point further behind by Davide Varvo, and it is a case that Slate's shown great momentum in the feature race, and we're looking forward to seeing what he can achieve tonight, with Kurt Van Hoenacker, Elwin Sykes and Liam Tack completing the top 10. 2 points outside the top 10 there in P11, Chris Keenan. We expect much from the Belgian once again. And behind him, Gareth Mills, the GM Racing Porsche machine driver, looking to try and get himself into the top 10 on 60 points currently. And then Mark Arrowsmith making his debut at last time out the Red Bull Ring on 17 points. Will he be able to get some more points if he is able to take to the circuit? As of tonight, we'll have to wait and see. Meanwhile, in the team standings, and these teams, of course, across both lobbies, Lobby 1 and Lobby 2, it is the case that Verano Motorsport going into this round leading on 424 points to RP Motorsport Pro-Am's 406 points, a delta there of 18 points, and it is the case that Verano Motorsport really trying to break away now the top. Racing Team Astra Blue, or RTA Blue as they're known in short, on 405, only 1 point off a P2, with Next Gen Racing really bringing up the best of the rest outside of the top 3 there on 386 points in P4, 1 point ahead of McChange by DB1, and Next Gen Racing with Sam Cases UK, the sister Next Gen Racing team, only a further 2 points behind. McChange by DB2 on 334 points, and it is the case that the second McChange by DB outfit will need to try and keep that momentum up because Team Racing Netherlands are closing them down, as is Hilliard Esport and also Racing Team Astra Team Orange there, who are both on 317 points, but Hilliard Esport ahead on result countback. Outside the top 10, it is RD Simsport in P11, ahead of Crest Autosport with Apex Tracks, and CXR Project Black only a further 2 points behind. TGC Racing and Excite Racing, they're battling for P14, a point separating the two of them. And then P60, it's DRS Esports LMS1 on 242 points, 8 ahead of Altitude Esports. Altitude Esports having to try and build up some momentum going into this round. RP Motorsport Senior in P18 ahead of Cresta Autosport Ferrari and Team Tetra Rouge, and outside the top 20 but not to be forgotten about, Hollerton Racing in P21, MRC Team in P22, BRM in P23, TGC Bottom Split Heroes in P24, and then last but not least DRS Esport LMS2, who we saw take to the circuit earlier on this week in what was Lobby 1, the Apex Racing Academy lobby, and putting in some great results there, currently in P25 going into tonight. So where exactly are we for tonight? Well, we've mentioned it previously, and now let's detail it. It is the Hockenheimring Baden-Württemberg GP circuit, or the Grand Prix circuit in full, located near the town of Hockenheim in the state of Baden-Württemberg in Germany. And this circuit, as we can see from the circuit map provided to us by simracingwiki.com, thank you to them as always, is the case this circuit consisting of 16 corners, a very technical circuit due to its mixture of medium speed corners, hairpins, straights, and flowing chicanes, whether it be the run through turn 1 down towards the Einfahrt Parabolica of turns 2, 3 and 4, through the Parabolica curve of turn 5 up towards the Spitzakura hairpin of turn 6, a very fast opening section, then broken up by a more free-flowing section which goes into the Mercedes arena of turns 7 through to 10 before returning to a back straight and into what is the stadium section of turns 11 through to 16, ending of course with turn 16 the Sud curve or the South curve, and you can imagine it's going to be a tricky one for a driver because this is the most technical circuit they've raced on to date compared to the opening 5 rounds. Now as for our rules going into tonight, you will notice that the qualifying rule that was introduced last week as a trial has been removed. That was the qualifying rule to say that our classes, in terms of our car classes, would be split in qualifying. That rule has been revoked due to the trial giving feedback which has indicated that it would be unfair for the GT3 class drivers to have less time in qualifying than the LMP2 class drivers, so it is the case that qualifying will be mixed once again going forward. As for the standard rules then, let's take you through them. In terms of setup, our driver shall be running the iRacing sprint setup for tonight's races. In the sprint race, a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 17 or more instant points, and the grid shall be separated into car classes, starting approximately 10 seconds apart, with the LMP2 starting ahead of the GT3s. And in the feature, we have that same grid start separation, but the grid itself shall be set as a reverse grid based on the results of the sprint race. There shall be one mandatory pit stop, which requires our drivers to take on fuel. Changing tyres is entirely optional. Each driver will have one fast repair available, and if a driver accumulates 20 or more instant points, they will receive a drive-through penalty. Well, that's enough of rules, regulations, and everything in between. I know what you're all here for, and let's return to those live pictures. And we are getting ready to go racing now, or indeed, most of our drivers parked up in the pits, ready to go racing. But we see here Peter Lemkins making his way on around in what is the RP Motorsport Pro and Ferrari here. And Lemkins, really the driver who was on the ball in the season opener. He's dropped away a little bit since the season opener, but he's starting to find that momentum once again. And we're expecting great things from Peter Lemkins tonight, the Belgian driver, as he looks to try and close up to his teammate Lucas Romano, who really is, alongside Jeremy De Boever, the star of the GT3 Pro class at this current point in time. As the final practice session concludes, we now wait for the transition over into qualifying, and the qualifying session of 20 minutes is now underway, as all of our drivers will be making their way out onto the circuit. We can see Didi Developing there, and also Paul Walton are both charging their way out of the pit lane as soon as humanly possible, wanting to get out there before the big traffic jam starts to emerge. As you can see, Jeremy De Boever and Navarro De Boever, the son, are following behind, and as they make their way down in towards turn number 2, we do have Stephan Wessels there in the racing team at Austria, Blue, LMP2 and Dallara P217 machine, all making their way around on out laps. But as they make their way up to speed and up to temperature, we do look to the chats, whether it be the Facebook, the Twitch, or the YouTube chat. We say hello in both the Twitch and the YouTube chat to Darren Doherty, one of our drivers in the Apex Race Academy lobby that took place earlier this week. And we also say hello in the Twitch chat there to No Mercy NL, also known as Lamont Weather as I understand it. And we also say hello in the YouTube chat there to SSBB Motorsport Magazine. And we hope you're all doing well. And if you are tuning in right now and you're a little bit shy, do not feel as though you have to say hi, but feel free to say hi. We don't bite here at Next Gen Race. Indeed, we try to make everybody as welcome as humanly possible. And if you don't have access to a keyboard to say hello, I hope you are all doing well and you're set for the weekend, given the fact it is Friday tonight and the weekend is just around the corner, as we also say hello in the YouTube chat to Arjan Kregel. But right now our focus is on Paul Walton here, the fast flyer in the LMP2 class, as he makes his way into the final 2 corners, and we ride on board for the opening flying lap of this qualifying session. It's brought to you by the man himself, Mr. Walton. So coming out to the final corner and making his way onto the start-finish straight here, building his way out through the gearbox, upshifting into 5th gear, now into turn 1 here, chucking the car into the Nord curve, coming down a gear, using the runoff area as much as he dares before heading down towards turn 2, and as he goes into the braking zone here, braking that 100-meter board, coming all the way down to 1st gear, trail braking into the apex, and immediately getting back onto that throttle, using the whip of the circuit through turns 3, 4, and now charging all the way down to the Spitz Sakura hairpin at turn number 6. He goes through Parabolica here, completely flat out for the elongated left-hander, and as he makes his way down, you can hear the roar there of the Dalara's engine as he comes in towards that braking zone here, signs his brake marker, braking at about 120 metres as late as he dares, coming all the way down to 1st gear, the slightest corner on the circuit before accelerating out, and now building up his speed down the back straight here up towards the Mercedes arena. He's going to be flat out into the right-hander here at turn 7 and turn his way in up into 5th gear. He's got a bit of traffic ahead here as he brakes down into turn number 8. All this traffic compromising now is Gareth Mills, who moves out the way immediately and now making his way through and 9 and 10. It is the case, flying through the left into right combination, flat out there, and now making his way down the shorter back straight into the stadium section as he rolls through 11, downshift into 3rd gear there, interesting enough to get a little bit more bite into the apex before braking down into turn number 12, the banked left-hander here, with some traffic ahead as he flows on through, and now going through turns 13 and 14. Will the traffic impede him? We'll have to wait and see. Oh, goodness me, and it is the case that Walton impeded right at the end. That's Kurt Van Hoornacker ahead. I think he's just been caught napping a little bit, and oh, goodness me, it is the case. Ran a bit wide there, and Paul Walton, I think in a bit of frustration, he has to return to the pits, and he's not happy with how that's gone, but that was a lap almost to its conclusion by Paul Walton, and now we will wait and see how the response comes, and Stephan Wessels immediately sets a banking time of 128.246 before getting caught on that exit curb there at turn 1, and the car almost being sent flying into the wall, and that shows you how sensitive these LMP2 machines are to the curbs. A slight elevation change in the road and the car will be bounced around like a pinball as he makes his way now up to the Parabolica curve and onto another lap. But lap time's coming on in here as we say hello in the YouTube chat to Elwin Sykes, and I hope you're doing well, Mr. Sykes there. Also, we say hello in the Facebook chat to Paul Williams, and also we can see there the comment from No Mercy NL in the Twitch chat saying, please hand over the meatball to my mate Arjan Kregel on the YouTube chat. Indeed, hello to Arjan. And as our drivers continue to go on through here, we do see that Lorenzo Gualtieri right now has gone provisional pole in the GT3 AM class here with a 1:37.016, and that is the fastest GT3 time of anybody currently, including out the GT3 Pros. Now you may be wondering at this point, of course, there is of course a topic of much debate and perhaps controversy in not just this series or the Next Gen series, but also in series in general. What happens when you get an AM driver who may be faster than drivers of the same machinery but in a higher class? Well, this can happen in series, and when it happens, what it normally is an indication of not necessarily that a driver has been misplaced in terms of their initial classification, but it shows firstly how much the driver has developed over the course of the season today. Lorenzo Gualtieri and Tristan Dino Brega both showing huge signs of progress and development, but also it is the fact that because they're developing so much, their lap times are coming forward, and at certain circuits as well, they just simply thrive, and it's a sign that most likely in the future championships they will be assigned to a higher class with the same organisers, and it is the case, I would presume, that Gualtieri and Dino Brega, at the rate they're showing, they'll be going into a pro class for sure in the next championship that follows after this one. As we do see that Gualtieri currently right now the pole position man or provisional pole position man of the GT3 AM class, and Tristan Dino Brega second in the GT3 AM class and second overall in the GT3. So he comes to the timing line, and can he improve? Well, he improved in sector 1, he went purple in sector 1, but not in 2 or 3. He did not improve there at all as he rolls on through. As he comes charging on down in towards turn number 2 at this point, we do look for Tristan Dino Brega, to one of our GT3 drivers who's coming on to a lap in the near future, and we're just trying to find one at the moment, but a lot of our drivers coming towards the end. Oh, sorry, the start of a lap, and then we've got Liam Tack just making his way on to another lap. We are just trying to see if we've got anybody coming up through. I don't think so at this point in time, but we will wait with bated breath, as I do think we've got Kurt Van Hernacker making his way towards the end of a lap currently. In fact, here is the Audi R8 LMS driver as he rolls on through from a change by DB2, the junior outfit of them a change by DBT. And as he rolls on through turn number 12 here, we're expecting the Audi to go quite well at the Hockenheimring, given its natural rotation in the rear of the car as he rolls it on through 13 and 14. And we ride on board here with Van Hernacker as he takes you around for a flying lap of the Hockenheimring circuit. Making his way through the final corner here to go across that timeline and onto a new lap, charging across the line and proceeding all the way up to turn number 1, and into Nord curve he goes here. A dab of the brake coming down to 4th gear, flying on through, runs a bit wide. That may be disallowed in terms of track limits, but we stay on board as he makes his way down towards turn 2 here, while the Stanton brothers coming on through, and as he rolls it down into the hairpin, going all the way down to 1st gear and placing the car in the middle of the road through 3 and 4 before turning through, turn forward very nicely, and now making his way all the way out towards the Spitz-Sakura hairpin at turn number 6. Flat out here and not pulling all the way over to the left hand side because he does have some LMP machines coming through, but now all the LMPs are clear, and as Van Hernacker heads into the braking zone here, look for his brake marker around 140 metres there going onto the brakes because of the draft of the LMP2 machines, just taking away some of the front aero, and as he rolls out of the hairpin now back on the throttle and heading up towards the Mercedes arena. In fact, he backs off here, and I believe he is letting a driver on through, and unless I'm mistaken, that is Lorenzo Gualtieri who's going to account for him. We continue to ride on board with now the South African driver as he completes the lap. So as he comes through turn 8 and up into 9-10, here's the case of Gualtieri flowing on through, taking a bit too much apex curve there at 10. You can see the car was launched on the front right side as he makes his way down to 11, heading into the Mercedes arena here. The difference between the GT3 cars and the LMP2s is just how much speed the GT3s can carry into the corners, a lot less than the LMP2s. They have less downforce to play with and have confidence in. Goes a bit deep though on the exit at 12, interestingly enough, and as he rolls through 13 and 14, I think this is going to be more of a sighter lap as he has been down in the first 2 sectors in his previous best. As he makes his way through the final 2 corners, I think Gualtieri goes a bit wide there through 16, carrying too much speed pre-apex, and that's just caused him to understeer. A lot of our drivers getting caught out with regards to how much speed they can carry through the corners, and we saw that in the Apex Racing Academy lobby in the races in particular earlier on this week, whereby in the GT3 Pro lead battle between Matt Caruana and what was Alistair Kirk, it was the case that Matt Caruana in the end understeering so wide that you think he was going to put it into the wall coming out to turn 16, but every time just about finding a way to rallycross his way back onto the circuit. It was heart and mouth stuff as he was racing, but as we head in towards what is at the 9th minute of this qualifying session, still 11 to go after this minute, you can see right now it is Stephan Wessels who is your provisional pole sitter in the LMP2 AM class ahead of Paul Walton, and in the return of Paul Williams here for Team Tetra Rouge, and he's currently P3, and well, we haven't seen too much of Paul Williams in recent rounds, but it is the case right now. The green lean machine of Paul Williams looking very strong as he rolls on through here, and this would be a season best qualifying result if he was to finish it P3 in qualifying come the end of the 20 minutes right now, and looking quite good as he rolls on through here and heads on to another lap. Now Team Tetra Rouge of course consisted of Paul Williams and Mark Baker, Where is Mark Baker? He's currently P7 as we jump to Mark Baker, coming through the final corner here and towards the end of the lap. He's up in Sector 1, his previous best, down in Sector 2. What about Sector 3? Does he improve in the end? He crosses the line, and for Mark Baker, it is not an improvement. He's going to have to go again here as he rolls in front. I think we do have a slight glitch on our time screen with regards to Mark Baker's lap time, and that may be resolved in the near future. In fact, it has just been cleared there as he heads through turns 2, 3, 4. What is the ultimate lap of the Hockenheimring all about when qualifying? It is the case that if you can get a little bit of slipstream coming out to turn 4 all the way down towards turn 6, and also in the run out to turn 6 down towards turn 7, that can give you the best part of 2-3 attempts over the course of the lap. But really, it's all about being confident in how much speed you can carry through the arena sections. A lot of the cars will be relatively even around here on the straights, albeit that we do know in the GT3 class the Mercedes is an absolute monster on the straights compared to its peers. But then it's through this section of the circuit, the Mercedes arena, and also the later stadium, that is where the majority of the lap time is made or lost, for the simple reason you've got to do it all on the brakes and rotating the car through the courses. We did see there Mark Baker just understeer a little bit under braking into turn number 8, carrying a bit too much speed under braking, and the car sliding away from him just to go in a bit beyond the slip angle of the tyres as he makes his way through 11 up into 12. Half the qualifying session now complete, but still plenty of time to go. Loads of rubber being laid down the circuit, and I do think that Mark Baker's got a bit more lap time under his belt, but he's just got to wait to improve upon it as he makes his way through the final 2 corners here. And I believe that may be a glitch on our time screens, because it does say right now he's on a lap, which is almost a 3-minute lap, but that's definitely not correct based on the fact we've seen him go onto this lap, and it's a 1:29.0 for Mark Baker, P5 in the LMP2 AM class. A good lap there. He's at 3 tenths ahead of Paul Scott, but still at 7 tenths down on Jim Stanton. And here is Jim Stanton coming to the end of a lap, going on to another lap now. He has got Tristan Dino Brega in front of him, as Dino Brega there improves to 1:37.081, and that puts Tristan Dino Brega P2 in the AM GT3 class, and indeed the GT3s overall. Lorenzo Gualtieri and Tristan Dino Brega absolutely flying right now and really showing their credentials in terms of how much they are bringing to the series. But whilst this qualifying session is going on, we do look to Navarro De Boever here, making his way down. Of course, the GT3 AM Championship leader going into tonight's round, with a bit of pressure on him, of course, with Tristan Dino Brega coming back into the championship with full momentum, albeit was the case that De Boever did get a fortunate break with Dino Brega having those technical issues in the feature race. Was not able to pick up what was looking to be a dead certain win in the feature, or at least a battle for the win with De Boever. But we'll wait to see how it plays out tonight, because of course, remember, qualifying is one thing, actually executing it in the race is a completely different story. But Navarro De Boever right now, I think damage limitation. If he can't be on pole, then he'll be as close as he possibly can to Dino Brega and Lorenzo Gualtieri. As we see De Boever here pulls off the race tonight to let some of the LMP2 class machines through. But as he makes his way on around and gets himself back up to speed, I did have the opportunity to catch up with some of our drivers in the build-up to tonight. And see Arjen Kregel parked in the pit lane here. And when I caught up with the Dutchman before going in, before he got into his car, he was saying to me, the GT3 AM driver, that this circuit is one of his favourites. And having climbed from P4 to P3 in the GT3 AM Championship going into tonight, it's only making him hungry for more results, more positive results. And we look forward to seeing whether he can pick up another podium or two, or perhaps even his maiden win. You never know what Arjen Kregel may be able to do. And we look from him to Tristan Dino Brega, who's come into the pits just now. When I spoke to Tristan Dino Brega going into tonight, he was saying the GT3 AM driver, P2 in the GT3 AM Championship, is that he's absolutely pumped for tonight. The racing should be good as the track lends to hard, close racing. As we see him there up on the jacks, having the tyres changed. Well, indeed, our 2 GT3 AM drivers, very positive and looking forward to the racing tonight. But meanwhile, going from a GT3 AM to a GT3 Pro driver, I can tell you it is the case that when I caught up with Jeremy De Boever, when I had the chance to speak to him about not only his thoughts going into tonight, but also his son Navarro De Boever's. Very different perspective here from Jeremy De Boever, in the fact that he feels as though he doesn't have too high an expectation with regards to his performances at the Hockenheimring, as whilst he knows the circuit well, it's not his favourite circuit. And at the moment it is clear that Lucas Romano is the man to be in the GT3 Pro Championship, so it's the case that with him being the man to be, and also on top of that, the rest of the GT3 Pro field in terms of their pace closing up to the top 2 of Jeremy De Boever and Lucas Romano very rapidly. The gap between the field now getting much smaller now that we're on the European continent. It is the case that Jeremy De Boever was telling me is that the focus is more on the feature race than the sprint race, for the simple reason that he's expecting to start ahead of Lucas Romano for the purposes of the feature race, given how the results would typically play out in the sprint. And that is because Lucas Romano would be expected to win it from Jeremy De Boever's perspective. So as a result, if Jeremy De Boever can stay ahead of Lucas Romano in the feature, he can take the points off of Lucas and keep well in the championship hunt. And that's going to be the game plan for tonight. But at the same time, Jeremy De Boever saying he cannot afford to make mistakes of his own. And, well, when he looked back to the Red Bull Ring, when he was asked about what he thought about what happened at the Red Bull Ring, particularly the flare-up between himself and his teammate, De Boever, the two of them, of course, you'll remember battling very hard in the feature when they didn't need to. He was saying to me that he walked away from the Red Bull Ring with mixed feelings because he was on his way to a deserved second place in the sprint, but was knocked out the race involuntarily, and that was a significant loss of points. Indeed, a major incident saw Jeremy De Boever lose out what was a dead certain podium, and then in the feature race, because he and De Boever were so focused on battling with one another rather than the importance of the win or the team 1-2, it's the case that they lost out some critical points in the championship, and they've learned from this and they're not going to give up. And the thing is, you're saying we can only afford to make that mistake once. We can't afford to do it again because Lucas Romano is the man to be. And, well, you can see him there right now. Currently P4 ahead of Jeremy De Boever, who's P6. And Lucas Romano is looking very strong. Albeit we say that, not looking as strong tonight here at the Hockenheimring. But still, 5 minutes in this qualifying session to go. And anything can happen in the remainder of it. We can see some surprises. And indeed, the one man who normally pulls off a huge number of surprises, but he's not doing that today. And in fact, remember, ladies and gentlemen, when we interviewed him last time out of the Red Bull Ring, he was saying he wasn't trying to make a habit of delivering those provisional pole laps or those pole position laps in the LMP AM class right at the end, although he always seemed to. Stephan Wessels this time is currently provisional pole by almost 2/10 of a second versus Paul Walton, so he's delivered it very early in the session this time. Will he be able to deliver it even more later on? Because really now it's just about raising the bar ever higher. So that way P2 man Paul Walton and P3 man Paul Williams have to try and push even harder to close up. We will wait and see. As we see, Wessels made his way into turn 2 and being impeded a little bit by the GM racing machine of Gareth Mills there, albeit I think Mills would argue he is on a flying lap, which is according to our timing screens. So as a result, it's a trip up between the two drivers. We do look to Navarro De Boever, who's in the pits, taking a pit stop here to go for a change of tyres. You can see the front tyres in particular up on the jacks. And, well, I didn't have the chance to catch up with the youngster in particular, but I did have the opportunity to catch up with his father to talk about Navarro De Boever's thoughts going into tonight. And his father, Jeremy, was telling me that for Navarro, he's doing what he can at the moment, and sometimes I feel like he's doing more than what he can actually do in terms of outperforming expectations, which is great to hear. And indeed, he's pushing very hard, and he's hoping that for tonight that he can keep up this momentum, but perhaps he will drop a stitch and then Tristan will strike mercilessly. That's in reference to Tristan De Boever, of course, the main championship rival at this time. And, well, it's the case that Navarro is in a very difficult championship fight between the two of them, as we do look to Navarro making his way down towards turn 2. And the expectation is that De Boever is a similar driver to Lucas Romano, if you want. In fact, very strong and building a lot of championship momentum. And as the season's not halfway through yet, we do know that Navarro De Boever and also Tristan De Boever will not be giving up any time soon. And both drivers are going to be learning from each and every round, learning from each and every mistake. And that's what Jeremy keeps saying with regards to his son. He's just got to keep on learning from mistakes and keep on pushing. And if he can do so, he can take the fight to Tristan De Boever. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out in practice here with 2.5 minutes to go. And as our drivers continue making their way around, we do look to Sean Scooter, the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, who really has had a bad run of form and a lot of bad luck over the last couple of rounds. And you remember he was involved in that major incident towards the end of the feature race, a very unfortunate incident, if I remember correctly, between Scooter and also what was Peter Lemkins. The two drivers coming together, coming out to turn 7. And funny enough, they're literally nose to tail on the circuit right now. Hopefully nothing bad will happen between the two of them, but it was the case that Scooter was on a run of form, and that form and that momentum was curbed towards the end of the feature. But he is looking as though he's back in the zone, and we look forward to seeing where he can end up at the end of this qualifying session. And run a bit wide out the final corners, and I think that may be a disallowed lap as a result. And if he doesn't improve there, he goes on to what will be his penultimate flying lap. But meanwhile, as we look from him ways back up into the LMP2 class, we can see Sam Holman, meanwhile, P4. He's currently the best part of 3 tenths down on Paul Williams. And Holman, Mr. Consistent, as we like to refer to him at this time, as he makes his way down into turn number 6, looking good for where's the top 5 qualifying position. He is only half a tenth ahead of Jim Stanton, as we see that Mark Baker, my apologies, but Mark Baker improves to a P6 down to 128.572, still 2 tenths off of Jim Stanton, who's into the pit lane. And as all of our drivers make their way on around right now, I think Sam Holman just focusing on doing what he can do here. But it is the case, I think the top 3 are quite a way away as these laps continue to count down. Indeed, the time continues to count down at this moment. And right now, I do think that Sam Holman might be looking to just try and raise that bar slightly for P4 to hold on to that position. Now give him a good starting position on the second row of the grid, whereas Paul Williams has been a bit of a revelation since his return today, in the fact right up there and really looking to be the best of the rest outside of the two main championship protagonists in the LMP2 class. But we were wondering earlier whether it would be the case that we'd see a GT3 Pro manage to out-qualify the GT3 AM drivers there, and Lucas Romano set the fastest GT3 lap of any in this session of a 36.88 or 36.876 to be precise, and well, that's not too much faster than Lorenzo Gualtieri. It's only faster by approximately 300ths, but it's enough as he makes his way on down here, and Lucas Romano delivering the goods at the last possible hour. And the BMW M4 driver definitely the man on a ball here today, as we're hearing that Sean Scudder has improved to P3 in the GT3 Pro class of 37.1 for him, as Romano parks it up. Oh, goodness me, Jeremy De Boever getting a bit wrong under braking there and almost hitting the rear Lucas Romano, and that would have been a bit uncomfortable for the pair of them. As we see Peter Lemkins meanwhile P2 in the GT3 Pro class, but he is currently timing-wise behind Lorenzo Gualtieri and also Tristan De Boever here. So it may be the case that Lucas Romano ends up all by his lonesome on the front row of the GT3 grid with the AMs separated from the rest of his pro peers. We'll have to wait and see, as the checkered flag is now out, so all the laps have yet to come in, and we do see that right now it is Paul Williams who crosses the line. Does he improve? He does not improve, does Paul Williams. We've got more laps coming on round. We've got Gareth Mills making his way through the final two corners now. The GM Racing driver is currently P9 in class in the GT3 AM class, and as he rolls on through the final two corners here, can he improve from that position? He's 300ths down on Davide Favo. He comes to the timing line, and it is not an improvement for Mills. What about for Paul Williams? Well, not Paul Williams, Paul Walton. Well, Walton's into the pits. He's coming in, so that'll be no more from the driver who is in second, and he'll be started second. And what about what is Jeremy De Boever here, I believe, as he makes his way there. He is coming out of what is it, turns 13 and 14 up into 15, 16 now in the Mercedes AMG machine, and as he rolls on through here, can he improve from P5? He's currently 1.5 tenths down on Dirt Bounce, who's in the pit lane, and as he comes to the end, he's gone purple in sector 2, has Verlaine. What about in sector 3? He does improve. That sector 2 was strong enough to get him to P4. Dirt Bounce is demoted to P5. What about elsewhere? We see Gus Franken returning tonight. He's not able to improve. It'll be P8 for Gus Franken, last of the GT3 Pro drivers in terms of classification. And then as for what is our GT3 AM drivers, De Boever comes to the line, and he only in the end goes P3 in class. He improves, but it's not enough to dethrone Tristan De Boever or Lorenzo Gualtieri from P1, P2 in the GT3 AM class. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wessels on pole in the LMP2 AM class, Lucas Romano on pole in the GT3 Pro class, and then it is Lorenzo Gualtieri who returns to the front of the GT3 AM grid, as we now wait for the transition over to the grid for race number 1. And do keep in mind as well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the case that our qualifying times may get updated, because these qualifying times do not respect those disallowed laps for track limits due to this being a replay file, but we will get that full clarification with regards to laps very shortly. So let's take you through that grid in preparation for race number 1. So starting on pole, in fact, we have had it confirmed. It is Paul Walton on pole in the end by a margin of less than a tenth versus Stephan Wessels. So our timing screens were incorrect there. Wessels did have a track limits invalidation for what was his classified fastest lap. But it is Walton and Wessels on pole, the two championship contenders there looking to go toe-to-toe once again. Paul Williams started P3 in the season best qualifying performance, and he will be joined on the second row by Sam Holman. Do not rule out the championship contender from Hollerton Racing. He may pick up some key points for his consistency. Jim Stanton at P5. Alongside him Mark Baker P6 with Team Tetra Rouge, and it is Paul Scott and Baz Beecham line up on our fourth row, with Jack Wyburn and Jonathan Collins making up our fifth and final row for the LMP2 AM class. Row number 6 consists of Lucas Romano, who takes pole for the GT3s overall in the GT3 Pro class, and he has Lorenzo Gualtieri, P12, starts off as our pole man for the purposes of the GT3 AM class. Behind him on row number 7, Tristan De Boever and Peter Lemkins, the AM ahead of the Pro, and then it's Sean Scudder and Jeremy De Boever who make up our 8th row, followed by Jeremy De Boever and Dirt Bounce on row number 9, and then Lammert Wedder for Team Racing Netherlands, joined by Navarro De Boever, the changed by DB2 driver, making up our 10th row. P21 on his return today, Gus Franken from the Netherlands for RP Motorsport Motorsport Seniors, followed by Elwin Sykes, P22 for Racing Team Astra Orange. Then Kurt Van Hoenacker and Mark Sykes line up on our 12th row. And behind them, we do have on a row number 13, Davide Favo from Racing Team Astra Orange and GM Racing's Gareth Mills. And on our 14th and final row, I do believe, Arjan Kregel for Team Racing Netherlands and Liam Tack for TGC Racing. I believe James Slate's entered into the wrong lobby, and that is why he's listed there. But of course, he won't be racing in this one, unless I'm very much mistaken. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have now got the grid fully formed and we do wait to go racing, and it will be to Paul Walton to take our grid around to kick off the proceedings here today at the Hockenheimring for race number 1 of the 2 races, and that will of course be the 15-minute sprint as this grid is currently being finalised. Place your bets. Who is it going to be out? Paul Walton or Stephan Wessels? It was Wessels last time who got the upper hand on Paul Walton. Will Walton be able to come back today? And I can see that in the Facebook chat. Paul Walton Senior saying, let's go Junior, as in Paul Walton Junior. Faith in my son as usual. And we also say hello in the Facebook chat there to Katie Hughes. Good evening to you. And Paul Walton Jr., the driver, is tuning in via the YouTube chat there. And well, as they make the way around, remember there will be a 10-second gap between our LMP2 drivers and our GT3 drivers, as the GT3s are currently backed off further in the rear of the picture. But right now, the 2 main protagonists in the LMP2 AM class, we've been waiting to see them go toe-to-toe. We saw our first glimpse of it last time out the Red Bull Ring. We're going to see it again here at the Hockenheimring. They come through the last section of corners, and it will be to Paul Walton to take us to the green. And it's lights out, away we go here for the sprint race. And Stephan Wessels gets the jump going into turn 1. Paul Walton backs in behind here. But look up the inside, Paul Williams, they're going defensive as we see Sam Holman getting a brilliant start to the race. And Sam Holman jumping up into P3. And Paul Williams caught sleeping there at the start by the looks of things as Jim Stanton's coming through. Oh, goodness me, and that is Mark Baker with a little bit of a rallycross moment there as we see a little bit of elbows out from Jack Wyborn coming through up to P7 is Wyborn. Jonathan Collins battling with Baker as they make the way on through. Meanwhile, back in the GT3 class, it is the case that we can see, well, we do have Lucas Romano who's made his way on through already and up towards what is the lead and holding on to it ahead of Lorenzo Gualtieri tucked in behind. And then further back we do have Tristan De Boever tucked in close as they come roaring on down towards the hairpin. A bit further back we have Sean Scudder battling with Jeremy De Boever, and as they make the way down into the hairpin braking zone here, we can see it. Gualtieri try, oh, goodness me, Sean Scudder tapped there by Jeremy De Boever and just missing Peter Lemke, so I think we'll have his heart in his mouth having seen that Ferrari skid across the front of him and thinking, now how on earth did that miss me? I'm going to have to go buy a lottery ticket after that one because my luck seems to favour me. As Peter Lemke's in P2 in class chases after Lucas Romano, but there's a sizable gap between the two of them, as meanwhile we are hearing a bit further up the road. Jonathan Collins has had a major off coming out of what was turn number 10, and with flash of lights, I'm not sure if he was involved in contact with Mark Baker, but the two of them seem to have had a bit of a moment nearby one another. As meanwhile, looking back to the GT3s, whoa, goodness me, and that's Navarro De Boever in contact there with Gareth Mills, both drivers in contact, and I think when Navarro De Boever looked as though he was sideways across the circuit, a spin coming out of what was turn 10, and Gareth Mills, the unfortunate driver to drive into him, as they now both pull off the circuit, and I think they've got significant repair work on the car. But after one lap, it is Paul Walton who is leading in the LMP2 AM class ahead of Stephan Wessels in P2. The gap between the two of them, 9/10 of a second. Sam Holman in P3, followed by Jim Stanton in P4, and Paul Williams in P5, followed by Paul Scott in P6. Jack Wyborn P7 had made significant gains at the start, followed by Baz Beecher in P8, then Mark Baker P9, and it is Jonathan Collins in P10 as things currently stand as they all make the way on through. Meanwhile, in the GT3 class, we have Lucas Romano leading currently for the GT3 Pros and overall. Behind him, the GT3 AM leader, Lorenzo Gualtieri. Then Tristan De Boever, P2 in the GT3 AM class. Behind them, P2 man in the Pro class. That is Peter Lemke. Then Jeremy De Boever in P3. But of course, a cloud hanging over him with regards to that contact with Sean Scudder. That will be investigated after the race, most likely. Then we do have dirt bounce in P4 in the GT3 Pro class there. And behind him, Didi Di Valami, in pursuit. Gus Franken at P6. And there is Kurt Van Hoenacker, who is third place currently in the GT3 AM class there, as he makes his way around P19 overall, as he tries to hunt down what is Tristan De Boever or Lorenzo Gualtieri. But really, for Van Hoenacker now, it's about carrying the weight of the challenge by DB2 team on his shoulders, with his teammate being involved in that huge instant, of course, as he rolls them through the corners. Indeed, as you say there, no mercy in the Twitch chat, quite a bit of first round carnage, and we don't love to see it, but it does happen in racing, as our drivers continue to make their way on around. As they do, we look to Mark Sykes here, who's trying to go on the offensive versus Liam Tack in front. And of course, the next gen racer for Sam Case's UK driver here from England, looking to go on the offensive. He can't quite find a way on in at this point in time. And as he continues to probe the back of the Ferrari driver of Liam Tack, does he go for it into turn 12? No, he backs off. He waits the opportunity as they roll them through. But as they do, you can imagine that the longer Mark Sykes spends tucked in behind Liam Tack, the more time he's losing to Elwin Sykes, not the same family, even though they share the same surname, who's just up the road as they make the way through. And we see Jonathan Collins there off circuit. He's had a bit of a moment coming through 15 and 16 as they now make the way on to another lap. But as they do, they come charging across that timeline. You can see Mark Sykes taking a little bit of a peek into turn 1, just trying to distract Liam Tack, but Liam Tack not falling for it. In fact, Sykes running a bit wide there. If he does that too many times, he may get slowed down. Alternatively, too many instant points and a potential drive-through penalty. But we do see Liam Tack there. He just disappeared briefly, and that is due to connectivity, and you have to be careful of that. As meanwhile, we look from them to what is our two leaders in the GT3 AM class, and we can see it's Lorenzo Gualtieri, the Racing Team Astra Orange driver, being chased by Tristan Di Larrega, who is the sister team driver from Racing Team Astra Blue. And well, of course, these two are racing for their respective teams, the sister teams, and also at the same time racing for their own Drivers' Championship, both of them battling the GT3 AM Championship. And it is the case that Tristan Di Larrega right now would love, no doubt, to take a win here, as that would give him a huge gain over Navarro De Boever down in P9 over the course of this first race as they make the way through and up into the stadium section. But you can see both drivers there nip and tuck as they make the way in under braking. And as they do, we look a bit further up the road to Paul Williams here, and also Sam Holman and Jim Stanton in particular. Jim Stanton all over the back of Sam Holman, the Hollerton racing driver here in the battle for P3 in the LMP AM class. He's going to have to defend through Parabolica curve. He's going to be the outside to the inside into the braking zone for the Spitzkehrer hairpin. And as they make the way on through, I think Stanton's going to try and go all the way around the outside, but Holman drags the brakes in very nicely, but he gets unsettled at corner exit, and Paul Williams here is going to have a good run, but he backs out of it. They're very sensible there, Paul Williams. No, 3 does not go into 1 as they make the way into turn number 7, but Holman really coming back here at Stanton. These two, we see plenty of battling, and there's a tap there from Holman on the back of Stanton, but unfortunately for Stanton, he hasn't completely lost the car, instead settled down, but Holman has gained the position there, and I do wonder where he's going to try and let Stanton back on through into turn number 11. And they do have Paul Williams parked in behind them, and Holman does. He lets Stanton take the place back as they now make the way back up into turn 12. Fair sportsmanship there from Holman as they roll through into turn 12, and Navarro De Boever there having to stay high and dry as they make the way through the bank corner with these 3 LMP2 class machines all rolling them through. But it is the case that Paul Williams has actually lost out quite dearly, being tucked in behind Navarro De Boever there. Being cautious is the Team Tetra Rouge driver. I think very smart to be cautious, to be fair. That caution has cost him quite a bit of time on the 2 drivers in front of him in that battle for where's the LMP2 and podium as he makes his way on to another lap. As he does, we look from him to a bit further down the road, and I can tell you that after we cut away from them, that Mark Sykes has found his way past Liam Tack. He's now up into P5 in the GT3 AM class, and now chasing after Elwin Sykes, the McLaren driver, the McLaren MP4 12C driver, as the flames spit out the back of the British machine as the South African driver here makes his way out to turn 10 and up towards turns 11 through to 16. Now feeling a little bit of pressure here, will Elwin Sykes. He makes his way through. He'll know that Mark Sykes is closing rapidly. These two have battled plenty of times before. They know one another very well out to the circuit. We ride on board here the gearbox of the Racing Team Astra Orange machine as he rolls them through 30 and 14, as he comes through 50 and 60. The flames coming out the back on the McLaren there, and as he heads through the double right-hander, you can see how Mark Sykes taking pronounced different lines between the two of them, with the fact he's taken a much more U-shaped line compared to Elwin Sykes, who's taken a more of a V-shaped line. And as they roll on through turn number 1, it is the case that Mark Sykes closing little by little as they head down towards the hairpin here. He takes a peek, but he doesn't go for it. The Audi driver, he waits instead, waits for another opportunity, but Elwin Sykes goes very deep here, and this is going to give Mark Sykes every opportunity to cut it around the outside, and he does indeed. And Mark Sykes there, the Englishman, gaining another place. He's now got an 8.5-second gap to close down to Kurt van Hoornacker. That's going to be a huge margin to close down the space. Half the race remaining, 7.5 minutes to go, but you never know what can happen until that checkered flag falls. We will wait and see. But as he does, we do look to our GT3 Pro class drivers, and in particular DDD Belanger right now, who currently in P5 in the Mercedes, is chasing after fellow Mercedes driver, Dirt Bounce, for RP Motorsport, as they both roll through turn number 10. And as they do, of course, no love lost between these two in terms of battling out in the circuit. We've seen plenty of battles between the two of them in the past, but as they make the way on through, it is the case of who is the best of the Mercedes drivers. With the fact Jeremy De Boever currently in P3 in the class of the Mercedes, then you've got these two P4, P5, and then you've got Gus Franklin a bit further back in the Mercedes in P6. And well, we will wait and see whether they can move a bit further up the road. But you'd say right now it looks like it's a bit of a stalemate here between the Mercedes drivers as they make the way on through. Now, as we see DD rolling his way on to another lap, we look a bit further up the road to Jeremy De Boever here, who is chasing after Peter Lemkins. And this Mercedes, of course, very fast on the straights and the flat-out sections, but struggles a little bit in terms of rotation, particularly through the hairpins and the low-speed corners. Because of the front engine rear-wheel drive nature of the machine, it does mean, of course, the centre of mass is located more towards the front, so under braking the car is more likely to understeer, particularly on turning. The car can take a bit more effort to turn through compared to the Ferrari of Peter Lemkins ahead. Mid-engine rear-wheel drive, of course, the engine located towards the middle to rear of the car, and therefore the centre of the mass further back, which gives the car more rotation. But the balance of performance between these machines does mean that the Ferrari suffers on the straights compared to the advantages it has through the corners. And you're seeing that here with Jeremy De Boever closing up to an extent. But now, as we start to go into the more technical corner-based section, you'll see that the fortunes are reversed, and Peter Lemkins now has the opportunity to open the gap up a little bit further, at least stabilise the gap compared to prior as they roll on through. Now, as they do, I can tell you that it is the case, unless I'm very much mistaken, that I believe Sam Holman has actually gone off circuit somewhere. In fact, there was a major off track for Sam Holman that we have not seen on camera, but Paul Williams has moved up to P4, and Sam Holman now has Jack Wyborn in the battle for the LMP2 AM Class P5 position. You see Wyborn there taking a P, and Holman defends the inside. That inside line, it tapers very close to the apex, and you have to take a lot of speed out of the car to make the hairpin. Holman nailed it very well there. He does a little weave to the inside, we're switching back to the outside here for the run in towards turn number 7. But Sam Holman, I think the Hollerton racing driver, definitely feeling some pressure here from Jack Wyborn. I don't think Holman feels composed in that machine right now. I think he's feeling the pressure, and the MRC team driver really starting to close up as we ride on board here with Jack Wyborn as he gives that pursuit. Now, where can Wyborn gain, do we think? Well, we do know that on the straights and the flat-out sections, these LMP2 machines really gain in the slipstream, but through the corners, we've got to keep an eye on the fact that Wyborn will have to deal with the fact he's got the dirty air off of the back of Holman's car. You can actually see that there through turn 12, where he understeered a little bit into the apex, and that's cost him roughly half a temp as they roll through the final 2 corners. But this distance of a second, that dirty air is not going to be felt as aggressively as they make the way onto the start-finish straight and now onto another lap. Just over 4 minutes to go here, and Wyborn charging through the Nord curve, closing a bit more to Holman. Had a bit of a butcher's look at turn 1 and got it wrong as they make their way down towards turn 2. You can see Wyborn really aggressive on the brakes. They're really going as deep as he can, and Holman just constantly the rear jutting out every so often when he gets on power. Holman just not feeling comfortable right now. Wyborn too far back to capitalise here on the run up towards the hairpin, but you can see in the draft how he is gradually closing little by little. So you can imagine this battle could kick off at a later date as they make their way into the heavy braking zone, and through they go. And Holman goes a bit deep compared to Wyborn. In fact, Wyborn there really closing up. He loses out on corner exit, but that's natural ebb and flow between the 2 cars. But right now, Wyborn, it would be said, is the more composed of the 2 here at the Hockenheimring in this sprint race. And will that have any bearing on the optics right at the end? We will wait and see. As we do look to the exterior cameras here, we look back to the battle for the lead of the GT3 AM class, and we can see Lorenzo Gualtieri here, the Racing Team Astra Orange driver, still leading ahead of Tristan Dino Brega, who is now 9 tenths behind. Now, I do wonder whether these two are in a little bit of a holding pattern right now. In terms of their lap times, they're identical in terms of lap times recently. That last lap from Lorenzo Gualtieri at 37.6, Tristan Dino Brega at 37.6, and they were only separated in the end by 100th of a second. And I would say that they're perhaps just calming it down. And for Tristan Dino Brega, is it a case that perhaps coming second to his sister team's driver is going to make a major difference in the championship? Well, of course, you want every possible point in both your Drivers' Championship campaign and also what is the Team's Championship campaign. But at the same time, in the Mark Sykes Team Championship, you can imagine that a P2 combined with the results of what is Stephan Wessels and also Sean Scooter will go a long way, albeit Scooter down in P8, unfortunately, due to that incident in the pit lane. He's had to retire the car, but still, Wessels picking up what is that P2 versus what is the P2 here. Tristan Dino Brega will go a long way for both drivers. And also, Dino Brega lost out considerably with those technical issues in the feature of the Red Bull Ring. So I think he'll just want to bring home what is a dead certain P2 here in the sprint. and in doing so, it'll work out very nicely for him, and also it will give him positional advantage for the reverse grid going into the feature versus Lorenzo Gualtieri. You've got to play tactics as well with that reverse grid, and I think right now De Boever is doing a great job of that with 2 minutes to go plus the final lap. And we do look a little bit further back here, and we do see Jeremy De Boever having to let on through what is Paul Walton and also Stephan Wessels here, the 2 battlers for the lead of the LMP2 AM class. That's Walton at the foreground of the camera, Wessels behind. You see they weave their way through the GT3 traffic, and as they come onto another lap here, their penultimate lap, Paul Walton looking very composed right now, and he just seems to have that edge over Wessels here. But of course, remember, it's not all said and done until the checkered flag falls, and the RD Sim Sport driver will know that due to the pain that was suffered at the Red Bull Ring. And as he makes his way down towards the Parabolica curve here, it is the case. I think the 2 of them, just enough daylight between them to keep Paul Walton safe for the time being. As they make the way down, we do look to P7 man in the GT3 Pro class, Lambert Wedder here. He is the best part, 6.5 seconds down on Gus Franken, and it's not quite working out for him at this point in time. But we do have to cut away because I think Mark Sykes, oh goodness me, and whilst we can't take a look back as a replay due to technical limitations, I can tell you that Mark Sykes had a spin at the Nord curve and gone into the inside wall almost, and he's dropped down to P6, which has re-promoted Elwin Sykes to P4 and Arjen Krell up to P5. So I think they'll both be pleased to take the points, and Mark Sykes will be displeased with that, of course, but he's held off against Liam Tack here for the time being, as Liam Tack's not close enough to capitalise. But Mark Sykes there with an uncharacteristic error at turn 1. That has cost him quite dearly, as we do look to Arjen Krell, the Team Racing Netherlands driver here. I think he'll be happy with a P5 once this is all said and done, albeit a bit of snap oversteer on the exit there at turn 6, almost costing him the rear of the car as he makes his way up into turn number 7. As he rolls them through, it is the case that our overall leaders, our LMP2 leaders, have just gone into their final lap, so we will for them see them do 11 laps here. Not long to go, only 10 seconds to go in this race. And looking back up to the leaders of the LMP2 AM class, I can tell you the gap between the 2 of them, 2 seconds and slowly gaining. Indeed, it does look as though Paul Walton here has got this one in control for the time being as he rolls them through turns 3, 4 and 5. But as he does, he'll be thinking about just keeping it together. He won't be taking anything for granted. He will only take it for granted once the result has been confirmed. But meanwhile, look a little bit further down, and Tristan Niedebrega here, well, he's staying in P2 in the GT3 AM class, but he's dropping down the order compared to his pros. And I wonder if this is a little bit tactical here to let himself on the reverse grid start behind, my apologies, what would be ahead of a number of GT3 Pro drivers. That is a smart call there from Niedebrega, and I don't think that's against the rules to drop yourself down versus another class for the purposes of the reverse grid. But we look from him to dirt bounce right now. He's under pressure from DDD Blaming, who runs a bit wide there out of the hairpin, and DDD Blaming will now look to go on the offensive, but he's a bit far back, and well, can bounce the Belgian hold on as he makes his way into the Mercedes section of the arena. We will wait and see, but before we come back to them, we must pan to Paul Walton right now, because he comes through the final 4 corners, 2 to go. It is going to be a great start to this evening in the German circuit, the Hockenheimring. So he comes out the final corner. It'll be RD Sim Sports' Paul Walton who takes the win ahead of Stephan Wessels by 2.3 seconds. It is all drawn, and Stephan Wessels in the end comes home P2, and it will be Jim Stanton who in the end, as he rolls through the final 2 corners, will come home on the 3rd step of the LMP2 AM podium in a brilliant drive from start to finish for the privateer, and he finishes P3 ahead of Paul Williams in P4 on his return to the series. And then Sam Holman in the end, with that mistake earlier on, will be coming home in P5, which is unfortunate, but still plenty to build upon as he crosses the line. Meanwhile, I can tell you in the GT3 Pro class, Lucas Romano taking the win in the end by a margin of 3.3 seconds ahead of his teammate Peter Lemkins there. Congratulations to the RP Motorsport Pro Am drivers, and Jeremy De Boever 3rd and the final step of the podium. And then as for the GT3 AM class, it is Lorenzo Gualtieri who is your race winner for Racing Team Astra Orange, back to the top step. It's been a while since we've seen him up there, the Lamborghini Huracan driver, and he took the win ahead of Tristan Niedebrega, who let himself down the GT3 Pro order in the GT3 AM class car to a degree, and I think that set himself up very nicely for the reverse grid. And in 3rd in the GT3 AM class, it is Kurt van Hoornacker, and really Van Hoornacker delivering a great result with Navarro De Boever, his teammate, finishing P9 in the end. And I think Kurt van Hoornacker will be very pleased after what has been a difficult run of results in recent weeks. He's now back up there and on the podium, and a very well-deserved P3 for him. As we look back up to our LMP2 drivers, of course, Paul Walton and Stephan Wessels, we've seen Paul Walton has had the upper hand in qualifying and also the sprint, but now we have to wait for the feature and see how it plays out between the two of them once again. And well, Jim Stanton, to be fair, looking very, very good, very competitive here, as is Paul Williams, interesting enough. And I think these two, we may see quite a bit of action between them and indeed some of their peers going into the feature. We will have to wait and see and find out. But with that, let's jump to the race results. So the race results confirmed, subject to stewards' inquiries post-race. It is the case that in the end, overall taking the win, and indeed in the LMP2 AM class, Paul Walton winning by 2.3 seconds ahead of Stephan Wessels in P2, and Jim Stanton completing the LMP2 AM class podium. Paul Williams in P4 ahead of Sam Holman. Sam Holman having a difficult sprint race, but he'll look to recover it in the feature. Jack Wyborn P6, Baz Meacham P7, Mark Baker P8, and Jonathan Collins P9. Then P10, the first our GT3s, that's Lucas Romano taking the GT3 PRO class win ahead of Lorenzo Gutierrez, our GT3 AM class winner. And then Peter Lemkins in P12 and Jeremy De Boever P13 completing our GT3 PRO class podium. Dirt Bounce, P14 ahead of DDD Vlaming, and Gus Rankin P16 on his return. That is for Gus Rankin a P6 in the GT3 Pro class, with Tristan Dienebrega P17, that's second place in the GT3 AM class, ahead of Kurt Van Hernacker in P18, who completes our GT3 AM podium. And behind him, it is the case, as we continue to look down the results there, Paul Scott coming home P19, a difficult race for Paul Scott, ahead of Lamet Wedder P20, Adrian Kegel P21, ahead of Elwin Seitz, completing what is the top 5 there. Well done to the South African driver for bringing the McLaren home in the top 5. Mark Sykes in the end at P23, P6 in the GT3 AM class, ahead of Liam Tack, Davide Favo, Navarro De Boever, and Gareth Mills. Gareth Mills and Navarro De Boever being involved in that incident on the opening laps. Unfortunate for both of them, but they'll look to bounce back in the feature. And then it is the case that Sean Scudder completes our order in P28 there. And James Slate's listed as P29, but I do believe he did join the wrong lobby, unless I'm very much mistaken. If so, I do apologise. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to take a brief break. We'll be back in approximately 10 minutes' time for the build-up to the feature race. Don't go anywhere. You won't want to miss it. Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for the build-up to the feature race, which is due to get underway in just under 4.5 minutes' time. And as we look at Mark Baker making his way through turns 8 through to 10, we do have to apologise live on air for the confusion regarding James Slates. James Slates is meant to be in this lobby, despite the fact that I thought earlier on he's not meant to. And I do apologise, James, if you are watching right now or watching this back later, it is the case that it's one of those days where I've just simply got the names a little bit wrong, and I think it's the case I may have confused your Audi with another car. But of course, James Slate's having a difficult race number 1, and he'll be looking to bounce back as much as possible in race number 2 as we see him making his way on around. And I can tell you why I'll get confused with regards to the coloration of his car, the RP Motorsport Pro-Am driver, is because, dare I say this, it looks a little bit similar to the car that we saw Mark Arrowsmith bring to the circuit, and that's why I'm thinking I'm confusing the two. But now that that has been rectified, is the case we've seen there in the chat, and many of you enjoying the racing in race number 1. Albeit, it must be said, a little bit of calm race after the opening couple laps. Everything seemed to settle down rather rapidly, but now in this feature race we can expect things to kick off a little bit more, for the simple reason that of course we do have that reverse grid, and drivers will be trying to come on through the reverse grid order and get their way up to the biggest points paying positions as soon as humanly possible. And one driver who'll be starting up towards the front of the GT3 Pro class, given his finishing position, will be Gus Frank, the RP Motorsport senior driver, and well, we look forward to seeing what he can do on his return in the feature race line, the Mercedes AMG and GT3 machine, as he rolls up through their turns 9 and 10, and a little bit of contact there with James Slates, and Frank just simply powering on there like he did not feel it whatsoever. Well, to be fair, that Mercedes is quite a tanky and heavy car, and you can understand it. But again, coming over to one of our drivers who really did perform well on a return as a sprint race, Paul Williams here for Team Tetra, who currently, well, it says there P4, and that's exactly where he finished in class in the sprint race, and we're expecting great things from him in the feature. Indeed, it could be a great opportunity for him to come through and get some even bigger points for Team Tetra. We'll have to wait and see. He was close to a potential podium, albeit he lost out on the hunt of the podium when he was trying to make his way into the battle that we saw Sam Holman caught up with, but it was the case that Paul Williams getting caught up behind some GT3 traffic, and we'll now have to wait and see what he can deliver. But also on top of that, we saw that it went the way of Paul Walton in race number 1. In race number 2, as he gets a bit wrong there on the exit turn of 1, just pushing and fighting the track limits and then some. We say hello in the YouTube chat to Stephan Wessels, who said have the pit crew on standby, and indeed, well, pit crew are going to need to do a quick job on repairing that car, and they have indeed, as he makes his way back out the pit. And as he does, do see Paul Scott here, who had a bit of a difficult race number 1, the next gen racing driver, and he will be starting, as I understand it, towards the front of the LMP AM class and have an opportunity to turn things around in race number 2. We'll wait to see if he can do it or not. But 1.5 minutes left now as the timer continues to tick down, and as it does, of course, this series and indeed this lobby are being brought to you in sponsorship with IMB Racewear, and IMB Racewear, the #1 place to go to whether you're looking for racewear for sim racing or real world racing, whether it's team shirts, team jackets, all the way down to your own personalised sim racing shoes with your logos and branded on. It is the case that IMB Racewear's gear is for you, by you, and absolutely a brilliant racewear. Definitely recommend them. Go and take a look at imbRacewear.com today if you want to know more about the products up on offer. I can tell you some of the most customizable gear that you will find available in the sim and real world racing market. As Paul Scott rolls it down into turn number 12, we look from him to the McLaren behind, and that's Elwin Sykes, who in the end picking up a top 5 finish in the sprint, a very well deserved top 5 finish, a very consistent performance. And that's the one thing that's to be said about the racing Team Astra Orange driver, always seeming now to find a way to deliver a good result. He's not necessarily the fastest, and sometimes he goes under the radar, but he's always able to bring a result home. And as he makes his way around for one more flying lap in this final practice warm-up session, we'll be expecting another great performance in the feature. Can he make it 2 top 5s out of 2? We will find out very shortly indeed. But as we continue to wait, we also look to Lorenzo Gutierrez, his teammate here in the Racing Team Astra Orange driver, where he took the win in race number 1 for the GT3 AM class. Can he make it 2 out of 2? Or will a little bit of tactics from Tristan Niederbreger, his rival in the Racing Team Astra Blue machine, have spoiled the party, given the fact he'll be starting a lot further up the grid, given that he let a number of the GT3 pros through before the race ended. But with that, it is now time for us to transition over to setting the grid for the purposes of race number 2. And as that grid is set, we unfortunately can't quite bring you the grid as such, for the simple reason our replay file will not let us do so. But what we can do is look to the grid that is forming. We can look to the blimp camera in particular and see in particular all of our GT3 machines starting to line up towards the rear. And at the front, it will be our LMP 2 class machines all line up behind the safety car. And you can see there, Paul Walton started towards the back of the LMP 2 group, given he was our winner in race number 1, and meanwhile towards the front of it will be Paul Scott, and I do believe Paul Scott will be right up there in a short moment. But then we do have DD Blaming, who is quite savage in towards the rear of what is the GT3s as well. A lot of cars taken to the grid. We do have the best part of what is 28 cars on the grid, and we look forward to seeing how they all get on in this second race. Just waiting for that countdown and for the grid to be set. But as we do look up towards the front of the field right now, still a couple more drivers to line up, and there is Paul Scott on that front row. Alongside of it is Jack Wyborn. The gridding process is complete, and it will be, as I understand it, Paul Scott who takes us to the grid for the purposes of race number 2 here. We await the safety car to pull off as the formation lap gets underway, or the partial formation lap. It will be that manual double fold rolling start, and Paul Scott will be on the front row alongside Jonathan Collins. Then on row number 2 it will be Mark Baker and Baz Beecham, followed by Jack Wyborn and Sam Holman on row number 3, and then we will have Stephan Wessels and Paul Williams on row number 4 together, and then it will be Paul Walton by his lonesome on row number 5 for the LMP2 AM class. Gareth Mills will be your pole sitter for the GT3 class overall, the GT3 AM class, the De Boever alongside him. There is Davide Farber and Elwin Sykes behind, and Mark Sykes with him, followed by Lambert Wedder there, our pole sitter for the GT3 Pro class. But now we must look back up towards the front of the field. It is time for us to go racing, and for Paul Scott to take us away for another hour of racing action. And Paul Scott gets us underway with a brilliant start here as they make their way down towards turn number 1. And immediately on the offensive, Mark Baker looking up the other side of Jonathan Collins. Baz Beecham and Sam Holman coming together. Baz Beecham pushed wide as they make their way out of turn 1 and down towards turn number 2. And as they come charge on down, you can see Stephan Wessels immediately going on the offensive as he looks at the inside. Oh my goodness, and going in very heavy on the brakes there. Baz Beecham misses his brake his own entirely and taking Sam Holman with him. And that is very unfortunate for both drivers. And well, Beecham now just being a bit too late on the brakes. But meanwhile, as all of our GT3s come through, we can see it's the case that De Boever making his way into the lead and trying to run away with things nice and early after that disastrous sprint race. Damage limitation here with Gareth Mills falling back already. Have started on pole in the class, and a bit further back we can see there Davide Farbo alongside him almost as Lambert Wedder a little bit further back, and Farbo up the inside here, and Gareth Mills looking for the position, but Mills is made to go a bit deep, and Farbo is going to have the side-by-side run as they come out the corner. A bit further back you can see that Sean Scooter battling, well, so that's Tristan Dina Breger battling with Mark Sykes here, and Tristan Dina Breger has already made his way all the way up to P4 in the GT3 class. My goodness, the man is absolutely flying. Well, this is absolutely phenomenal stuff, and how Dina Breger has got that far up the order in such a short time, that beats me. But he's found a way, and now he's trying to close up behind Mills as they make the way out of turn 10 and down towards turn number 11. As they roll them through, it is the case holding off Mark Sykes there, and Kurt Van Hernacker trying to get into the mix as they roll it up towards turn number 12. Van Hernacker there backing off versus Mark Sykes as they make their way through the corner. A bit further back, that is Peter Lemkins battling with Jeremy De Boever here. They're side by side coming through the bank into turn number 12, and there's contact with Jeremy De Boever, and they both go off there. And well, once one car went, the other car went with him, and well, Peter Lemkins returning there and just carried his momentum through. And I don't think Jeremy De Boever's going to be very pleased with that whatsoever, as my goodness, is that Sean Scooter who's just spun on the exit of 15? It is indeed, and he's just gone off circuit. Jack Wyborn has jumped to the pit. It is all kicking off early. Sam Holman also in the pit, and a lot of drivers have been heavily impacted. But as we look to the front of the field, it is Paul Scott currently leading after a good start ahead of Mark Baker in P2. Stephan Wessels battling with Paul Walton, the two main protagonists in the LMP2 AM Championship, already coming to blows once again. And Wessels getting ahead of Walton, coming down the inside in towards the hairpin of turn number 6. And as they make their way up the speed, now Wessels has got ahead for the time being. But you can imagine that right now Paul Walton may be playing the fuel-saving game as they head into turn number 8, and Paul Williams up behind them as well. Team Tetra Rouge driver with a good start. So here the Elwood Sykes has jumped to the pit. Behind them we do have Jonathan Collins a bit further back, and then Baz Beecham in the wounded LMP2 machine with Navarro De Boever, the leader of the GT3 class, particularly the GT3 AMs, following through in what is P8 overall. Davide Favo further back here, and he's got the pressure of that's Lambert Wedder tucked in behind him, and Wedder trying to close up as rapidly as possible here, the GT3 Pro leader, as he makes his way on through turn number 10. Behind him is his teammate, and that is Tristan Di Grega, well, the sister teammate, I should say, Tristan Di Grega, as they make the way into the arena, into the stadium section in particular, and as they roll on through, it is the case. We've got some cars off circuit. That is Gus Franken off circuit, and with him, Lorenzo Gutierrez. We saw that in the rear of the pitch. We didn't get a close-up, but Lorenzo Gutierrez and Gus Franken making contact with one another into turn number 11, and a number of early instances we're hearing that Jonathan Collins has peeled into the pits. He's decided there's too much damage on the LMP2 machine from what I'm hearing, but right now a lot of drivers had a very difficult start to this race, and it's all going wrong for a number of members, as meanwhile we do look to DDD Blaming. Oh no, that's not DDD Blaming. Here is DDD Blaming, I should say, and he's in hot pursuit as we ride on board with him as he makes his way in the pursuit after what is their dirt bounces up the inside of Kurt Van Hoenacker. Blaming's going to try and come on through. Van Hoenacker, of course, will change by DB2, but Van Hoenacker's going to come back at Vouts as they make their way down the straight here, or the curve straight, I should say, through Parabolica curve and up towards the Spitzakura hairpin. And as they make their way up towards the very heavy braking zone, you can see how Bouts has already cleared Van Hoenacker, and that's the case where Laming has to try and look for a way into this as best he possibly can, but there's quite a lot going on further up the road, and that's in particular Gareth Mills going very wide, and with it Mark Sykes battling side by side here. This is the battle for P4 in the GT3 AM class. It's Sykes on the inside, Mills on the outside. Mills is going to try and carry through. There's contact between the two of them, and oh goodness me, and off the road there, that's also, I think that was Dirt Bouts, and there's contact with, goodness my lord, that's contact as well with Van Hoenacker, all four drivers off, and well, in the end, did they need to battle it that hard with less than 5 minutes of the race complete? You be the judge, ladies and gentlemen, but a lot of drivers have had major incidents, and with that, that's completely shaken up the GT3 AM and GT3 Pro classes. In particular now, James Slates has made his way all the way up from what I believe was the back of the grid to P4 in the GT3 AM class. He has gained massively since the start of this race, and he is flying now. Is the RB Motorsport Pro-Am driver as he rolls on through turn number 15 and into 16, and he is only 5 seconds down on Davide Favo ahead of him as he makes his way to the end of a lap as he comes across the line. It is one of those situations whereby we can see a number of drivers really out of sequence, such as Sam Holman there coming on through past some of the GT3 drivers, but we look back up to LMP2s and we can see that Paul Walton has actually got back ahead of Stephan Wessels since we last looked at them, and we ride on board the gearbox here, Paul Walton, as he tries to break away from what is the P3 driver behind him. There's been a lot of action in the GT3s, and the LMPs, while they're not delivering as much action per se, it is the case they're still pressing on. And hold up a second, that is Wessels, who's under major pressure here from Mark Baker as they roll up through turn number 12, and Mark Baker right now scrambling over the back of Wessels. I wonder if there's been a bit of an incident with Wessels, because he's dropping off the back of Paul Walton, and whether there's damage to the car as they make their way around. And just checking in with regards to race control, just see if there's any further information available as to what exactly has happened, but it is not looking good for Wessels as Mark Baker's up the inside here, and will not to upset Mark Baker or to say that he's not a fast driver. He is indeed fast, Mark Baker, but Wessels here really out of sorts. So I think there's something wrong with that LMP machine, because he's just got no pace in the run out of Nord Curve there, and Paul Williams comes on through as well. And just checking it right now, it is the case that I think there has been a bit of contact with regards to Wessels and Baker, and that has led to some significant front end damage and a loss of rotation through the high speed corners, and Stephan Wessels is losing the speed because of it, as right now it is Paul Williams on the inside of his teammate Mark Baker. Baker's not going to contest that. Baker goes as wide as he dares, and in fact I think Baker's just gone so far off the circuit he's going to make it side by side with Wessels. But yes, we have had confirmation there's been contact between Baker and Wessels and Baker have both got damage to the cars, which is holding them back in terms of outright pace. And as they make their way on through, it is the case that Wessels is going to try and stay out there and maintain the speed, but well, we can see right now Wessels is falling back, and this is costing very dearly versus Paul Walton up in P2. And well, it is going to be now about damage limitation. They're only 7 minutes into the hour, and normally we see the pit stops in the LMP2 class around the 20-minute region. It is a long way to go, and well, Wessels here is going to have to just try and nurse it all the way through with that front damage as he makes his way on around But as he does, I should say, 7.5 minutes complete. We look from Wessels to what is Lucas Romano down in P3 in the GT3 PRO class, and he is on the offensive versus DDD Blaming as they make the way down the back straight here up towards turn number 7. Into the Mercedes arena they go. Behind them, that is Davide Favo, and you can see trying to cover through is Jonathan Collins as Lucas Romano gives that hot pursuit. We do briefly lose it there with a little bit of connectivity issues, and that's Liam Tack off the road there. Liam Tack already a lap down, and he's got it wrong coming up through turns 8 and 9, and now he's just letting everybody come through before he reverses the car onto circuit. He's got a long time to wait, however, there's a lot of cars still making their way on through. But now they are clear. We do look back to Lucas Romano, and well, Lucas will be right on board here with the BMW M4 driver trying to find a way past Blaming. Lambert Wedder 3.3 seconds up the road, and this is a huge opportunity. As hold up a second, I think we've just had another major incident involving a number of drivers, and Lorenzo Gualtieri in particular. We're just trying to find him out on circuit. My goodness, there's quite a bit of damage between Gualtieri, Dirt Bounce and Mark Sykes, and I think the three of them have come together. Gualtieri in the lead lap, Bounce and Mark Sykes on a lap down, and this has not gone very well for any of them as RJ Kregel here tries to capitalise on the situation, as does, I believe that's Gus Franken, the AM driver ahead of the Pro driver here, but it is chaos in the GT3 class right now. And a lot of drivers being impacted with damage early on in this race. We're not even a sixth of the way there. We're not even 10 minutes in. And right now, I can count damage on more cars than I've got fingers as they make the way around onto another lap. And RJ Kregel right now must be rubbing his hands together and thinking, right, just pick up the pieces as you go. He's currently P6 of the GT3 AM class, and that equates to a P18 overall as he makes his way down towards turn number 6. And you can see just ahead Lorenzo Gualtieri there, who on the same lap as they make their way into that braking zone, trying to find a way on it. He looks at the inside there of Dirt Bounce, who is that lap down, of course, and Bounce trying to fight with him. I think what Bounce is trying to do here is trying to hold the position, because otherwise he will then be caught up in the situation where he's going to have to continue to yield as Bounce drifts his way through turn 7 up into 8, and he comes on back here, and this is very scrappy stuff, and there's contact between the two of them. I think Gualtieri is not going to be too pleased. I think Racing Team National Orange are going to be on the phone to the stewards there. It does seem as though there's quite a bit of animosity between the two drivers, and well, Gualtieri has been on the receiving end as they make the way back up to speed, but now it's the case that with that happening, the stewards are going to be very busy indeed. I can see Paul Walton saying there in the YouTube chat, indeed they will be very busy, but right now, speaking of busy, Paul Walton has found his way past Paul Scott. He's in the lead of the LMP2 AM class, and the RD Sim Sport driver is just shooting off into the distance, albeit it's a second between himself and Paul Scott, and we do know that Paul Scott has grown in pace over the last few rounds. We'll see if the next gen racing driver can mount that contest versus Paul Walton, or whether Walton now will take it off into the distance. We've got a lot of time, and anything can happen between now and the conclusion, of course. We will wait and find out as the time rolls on. After the opening 10 minutes, a lot of the battles now seem to have calmed down somewhat. We have entered that strategic phase to an extent as Paul Scott makes his way past Lorenzo Gualtieri there, but the closest battle out of the circuit at this point we can see is what is DDD Blaming battling with Lucas Romano. We look back from DDD Blaming's Mercedes AMG machine as he does have the BMW M4 off in the distance, giving the pursuit the gap between the two of them about 6.5 tenths as they roll them through at turn number 7 and up into 8. Now as they coming in, of course, DDD Blaming will not want to let Lucas Romano through at all, and a simple reason for that, Jeremy De Boever, I should point out, involved in those incidents earlier on, has dropped a long way down the order. He's down in P7, 26 seconds off. Shouldn't skip to him P6 of the GT3 PRO class, but DDD Blaming's mission right now for his Drivers' Championship and also for the Teams' Championship from a challenge by DB1 is to hold off Lucas Romano as much as he can, if not to the end of the race, and Romano's got to be aware of that. He's already probably thinking in the cockpit of that BMW M4, what do I need to do to get past DDD Blaming? Do I do it on circuit? Do I do it via undercut or overcut? When do I do it? Because Lambert Wedder right now is only 2.5 seconds up the road, and as the three drivers make their way onto another lap, I can tell you that Blaming and also Romano are both catching up to Lambert Wedder gradually over the course of each and every lap by about 1 or 2 tenths a lap. They are gaining on the Dutchman who's further up the road. Now as they head on in, we do see that Paul Williams in the YouTube chat with a bit of a shocked face indeed, I think, for the carnage earlier on that we have seen and the number of incidents. It's very unfortunate we have those that had those incidents, as we can see here Blaming under that pressure, and Lucas Romano getting ever closer as they make their way down towards turn number 6. Blaming goes defensive here very early. He's making Lucas Romano pin him to the inside, and as they make their way onto the braking zone, here's the case for Blaming. He's going to have Romano going all the way round, but there's not enough space to do him. Vlaming actually runs wide there. That'll be a track limits warning, and as they make the way down towards the Mercedes arena, Vlaming going defensive into Sam. Romano's going to try and go all the way around the outside, but it's very close. Romano has to back out. Here's Vlaming, puts it on the inside. Romano tries to go all the way round into turn number 8, but he goes a bit deep, and Lucas Romano oversells it into turn number 8. He now has to wait for another opportunity as they make the way out of the corner, and I think now he's going to have to take a breather, as meanwhile Mark Baker has been involved in a bit of a moment down at the hairpin from what we're hearing, and Stephan Wessels has found his way back on through for the time being. But you can imagine that these two, given the damage on their cars, the fact that Wessels is really struggling through medium speed corners, he's just not able to carry through any speed on the medium speed or the high speed corners, that it's going to swap back in the near future. A sign of a swap back will happen as both drivers roll their way through turn number 11. You can see it in the body language there of Stephan Wessels' LMP. He's just got no turning through that medium speed apex of turn number 11 as they make the way on through. But we look from them back to what is Vlaming versus Romano, and this battle, the closest of our GT3 battles right now, goes on to another lap. And as they make the way down into turn number 2, you can see Vlaming here simply under so much pressure, and well, he can use that Mercedes straight line speed, but do not count out what is the 6-cylinder turbo of that BMW M4 as they make the way down towards turn number 6. So you can see it is the case of Romano once again right there in the rail tracks of what is Vlaming, because they make the way down towards the hairpin. They were like this last time out, but this time Romano's gone earlier. He cuts back to the inside. He sells the dummy here, and as they make the way into the hairpin, he's up on the inside. Now, can he complete the move? I think he can. It's going to be a drag race up towards turn number 7. Romano on the inside, Vlaming on the outside, and as they come in towards the corner, it's going to be side by side all the way through. Vlaming is still there on the inside up into 8. Romano goes deeper on the brakes, and Vlaming just has nowhere to go other than to back off, and Romano with a brilliant dummy there, reminiscent of Mansell versus PK at Silverstone. It is the case that Romano is now up into P2 in the GT3 Pro class, and that is a critical pass for the championship as they come into the halfway point of the season. And Vlaming at this point must be thinking, what do I have to do to keep Lucas Romano at bay? Well, it's the case. I don't think there's anything you can do. Romano is flying, as it's now the case. They are 2.7 seconds off the back of the leader of the class, and that's this man, Lambert Webb of the Team Racing Netherlands driver. And I think he may be gulping right now for the simple reason that as they make the way down towards turn number 1, Lucas Romano is inching closer very, very rapidly as they make the way on through. As they come charging on down towards turn number 2, once again, we do look from them to a little bit further up the road, and I can tell that's De Boever and Tristan De Boever here. And De Boever, of course, starting on what was right towards the front of the class. Tristan De Boever starting towards the back of the class by comparison, and these, of course, are the two major championship contenders in the GT3 AM class. And as they make the way down towards turn number 6, De Boever is safe for the time being, but for how long? As they come through into the braking zone this time, you would have to imagine Stephan Wessels has come into the pit. So I look out my commentary box window to repair the damage on the car, and I think that may confine him into a two-stop strategy or a very fuel-saving dependent one-stop. It is the case that De Boever under major pressure here. Tristan De Boever trying to go around the outside, trying to get De Boever to go deep under braking, but De Boever does not fall for it here as they make the way into turns 9 and 10. But as they do, De Boever is going to be wary of the fact they do have Paul Scott trying to come on through, and as Paul Scott does, also Paul Williams comes through with him. Paul Williams chasing after Paul Scott, but Paul Williams showing that discretion is the better part of valour as they make the way into turn 11 by backing off completely, and that is very gentlemanly driving there by the LMP2 driver to let the GT3s go through the stadium section before finding a way past them, compared to Paul Scott, who just muscled his way on through. But Paul Scott will take the advantage where he can get it, that has to be said. And as we ride on board here with Tristan De Boever, the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, under huge pressure as they roll through the final corner, is De Boever, and De Boever here, he will see there's Paul Williams coming through on the inside of the pair of them, waiting for the right moment, rolling into turn number 1. You see De Boever here just feels a little bit more comfortable on the run out of the corner, down towards the turn 2 hairpin they go, and as they make the way into the corner, you can see no difference between the two, although De Boever does carry a bit more speed initially on into the apex, but then really sensitive on the brakes as he makes his way through 3 and 4. De Boever's got a really good run here. Now, where will he pin De Boever? Will he pin him to the outside or the inside? He doesn't pin him at all, and in fact he lets De Boever pin him to the outside here as they make the way in the long charge down towards the hairpin. And as they come into the braking zone here, it's going to be De Boever on the inside, De Boever on the outside. The two Ferrari drivers make their way through side by side, but De Boever goes a little bit deep, but De Boever cannot get the cutback. It's a good defense for De Boever, and De Boever's now got to try and outrun De Boever in towards what is turn number 7. But as they make the way on in, no change at the moment. De Boever's setting up another move. Will he look to the inside? He does into turn 8, but he's too far back to consider the move. He hasn't got the extension of the brakes, but De Boever goes deep. They'll be side by side through turns 9 and 10, but De Boever will hold the inside run here as they make their way through 10, and he'll have the momentum. It's a wide enough corner, you could go flat out there on the inside line. They make their way past the camera, shaking the camera utensils, and as they make the way on through, as we see Lambert Wedder there battling, it is Tristan De Boever who goes for the inside into turn 11, and as they come on through, we look to Lambert Wedder here under pressure from what is Lucas Romano, and De Boever came on through the inside into 11, and it wasn't Lucas Romano who could do the same to Wedder, but as they make their way around towards the end of this lap, that is a critical move for Tristan De Boever into lead the GT3 AM class, and now Lambert Wedder will have to see if he can hold off Lucas Romano behind him. I think it's going to be about when, not if, Lucas Romano goes to that potential move. It's coming in short order as they make the way onto another lap. A great move there from what was Tristan De Boever, and right now as they make the way on down, can Lucas Romano find a way to mimic it as they make the way into hairpin? Well, Lambert Wedder goes defensive there into turn number 2 and through 3-4 they roll, and Lucas Romano all over the back of the Lamborghini driver. It is nip and tuck between these two. A little bit further back you can see that's De Boever in the rear of the picture. They head down the straight here, and as they make the way in towards the hairpin, it's the case Lucas Romano peels out to the inside early. He's going to go for the break in here versus the more manoeuvrable Lamborghini Huracan, and as they come through into the apex, it is Lucas Romano ahead. Lambert Wedder does not contest it. He looks the cutback instead, but Lucas Romano knows it's coming and parks it on apex, and with that, Lucas Romano, ladies and gentlemen, is your GT3 Pro class leader at this time. Can he hold off the comeback from Wedder? I think the prediction would say yes. Lambert Wedder's looking very close, but he doesn't look for the move into turn 8 there. I think he's cognizant of the fact that De Boever is only 1.3 seconds behind and closing very rapidly indeed with the fighting that these two are carrying out. So as they make the way up into turn number 11, it is a situation whereby we have had changes for lead in both of the GT3 classes. We now have Tristan De Boever, the South African driver, leading for Racing Team Astra Blue in the GT3 AM class, ahead of the Belgian De Boever from the change by DB2, and then we have Lucas Romano, who's now taken the lead of the GT3 Pro class, the Belgian for RV Motorsport Pro Am, getting ahead of the Dutchman of Lambert Wedder for Team Racing Netherlands, and now De Boever will be looking to try and also pass Lambert Wedder, and to be fair, Lambert Wedder driving very smart, very sensible, and if he does this, he'll be sure of a podium, there's no doubt about that. We've still got a long way to go. We've only completed the first 20 minutes, the first third of this race, we've still got 40 minutes to go, and still the pit stops, that's the critical part of this race, because the pit stops could turn everything upside down if a driver times their pit stop to perfection or gets it wrong, gets caught up in traffic. We will wait and see. In terms of retirements from this race, we've only had one so far, and that is Jack Wyborn, who retired approximately 12 laps ago on what would have been on lap number 2 in the LMP 2 AM class race. There's no more retirements so far, but speaking of battles building, we can see here we do have Mark Sykes trying to find his way past Liam Tatt. These two have been battling for some time, and the next gen race with Sam Case's UK driver squirming left, right and centre over Liam Tatt. The TGC Racing drivers, they roll through the right-hander, and Mark Sykes is staying very close to the wheel tracks. Paul Walton comes on through as the leader overall in the LMP2 AM class, and as they make their way into turn number 1, we're hearing that James Slater has had an off track from P3. Meanwhile, we continue to watch here Mark Sykes, who's squirming left, right and centre, but Liam Tack's just unplussed by it right now and simply saying, well, you're going to have to get a little bit closer if you want to come through. James Slates has had an off, however, he's still holding on to P3 in the GT3 class further up the road, and we will look to him in short order. But right now, Mark Sykes still having to wait for that opportunity. But speaking of opportunities, it is the case that Lucas Romano right now, since getting into the lead, has broken away from Lambert Wedder, and Wedder now is falling further and further backwards to De Boever, because you see them both make their way through the camera shot. But meanwhile, we must come back to Mark Sykes, who's gone up the inside of Liam Tack there into the hairpin, and well, Liam Tack's had no way of coming back. And as they make their way down towards turn number 7, that is a place game for Mark Sykes. He's now up into P8 in class, and it is all about the recovery drive here for both drivers, both involved in incidents on the open laps. Liam Tack has already been into the pits twice to make it clear, and Mark Sykes has been to the pits once already, and that is not for a scheduled stop, I should clarify, as they make their way on around. Their next target will be Arjan Kregel, who is 44 seconds up the road, and Arjan Kregel has also had to take a pit stop already in this race. As the drivers both come on through, we do look from them to what is De Boever, who is chasing after Lammet here as they make their way down the straight, and as they come roaring on through, as we're hearing that Sam Holman has found his way past Baz Meacham for P5 in the LMP2 AM class. De Boever, they're almost taking the rear of Lammet, who gets it all sorts of wrong coming out to turn number 6. They make their way into 7 here. Boever's now going to go through the inside to outside here versus Wedder. Wedder's going to defend to the inside. He goes very early on the brakes there, does De Boever, to look for the cutback, and Lammet really struggling to settle the rear of that Lamborghini Huracan right now, whereas Boever looks very composed and very settled as they make the way down towards turn number 11 into the right hand. They go to enter the arena section, and as they do, this is where the Mercedes will lose out. It's not as strong through these medium to low speed apexes, and as they roll on through the bank corner of turn number 12, you can see Boever just staying right there with Wedder really under pressure right now as they make their way through 14 up into 15, 16. Boever all over the back of Wedder, almost tapping the back of the team racing Netherlands driver, and then a change by DB1 driver does have his teammate Navarro. De Boever tucked in behind right now, and I do wonder whether he's going to raise an eyebrow and think, do I let Navarro through or do I make the pass and then let Navarro through, or will Navarro simply just run out of patience? That could also be the question, but to be fair, knowing Navarro De Boever, I think he'll be very patient here and simply wait for things to pass. He's not being compromised too heavy right now, given the fact that Navarro De Boever has got a 10-second gap to what is James Slate's down in P3 in the GT3 AM class. We see Sam Holman there almost getting it wrong coming out of turn number 2, the LMP2 AM driver, as he now makes his way past the GT3 drivers, but Sam Holman having a difficult race down in that P4 position as things currently stand. As they make the way on down, it is the case no change between these three as we are now entering the pit stop phase of this race. In terms of the schedule stops, we've got a lot of drivers coming into the pit, including Peter Lemkens, who's come on in. And now where's Lemkens going to emerge? That will be the big question. He rolls on out of the pit lane here, and as he makes his way out onto the circuit, he comes back out in what is a P17 overall, according to my timing screens. That's P6 in class. He's given himself a lot of track to play with. This might actually work out for Peter Lemkens, given the fact that with what is that 6-second gap to Jeremy De Boever, he's not going to close up to Jeremy De Boever very rapidly. De Boever's already had a pit stop, it should be pointed out. So we'll wait and see how they play out the strategy. But right now, Peter Lemkens has given himself every opportunity to have clear track and simply put down some good lap times, essentially put in qualifying laps at this point in the race, and see if he can benefit from the undercut versus the likes of, say, Sean Scudder and De Boever. But we will wait and see, given the size of the gaps between some of the drivers in class, and it is a long way to go. And speaking of a long way to go, De Boever here, we ride on board with the Mercedes driver as the change by DB1 driver makes his way into turn 1, chasing after Lammet, but he's fallen a bit back compared to when we last saw them. The gap between the two of them at 0.5 of a second as they make their way down into the braking zone for turn number 2. You can see under braking, Boever just able to be much more aggressive on the brakes compared to the Lamborghini. Of course, the Mercedes with its very strong electrical systems enabling, particularly the anti-lock braking system, enabling Boever to be very aggressive under braking. Into the pits has come Paul Walton from the lead of the LMP2 AM class, but we focus and stay with the battle here for P2 in the GT3 PRO class as they make their way under braking into turn number 6. Boever staying very close as they roll them through. And you see Boever, what he's trying to do, he's trying to go nice and deep into that hairpin so he can get on the power early on exit there. Turn it into, in a way, a bit of an offset V shape for the hairpin compared to your standard U-shape approach. And as he rolls them through, he's trying to take every which way advantage to close up to the back of that Lamborghini. Of course, the difficulty he has is the fact that Lamborghini gains through these corners, and Boever's got to be pinpoint precise through these corners to stay with that Lamborghini, even more so in the dirty air. As you can see, there's just a little bit of native understeer as he comes through turn number 10 under full throttle, and that's the dirty air just taking off the front end slightly as they make their way through turn number 11. As they roll them through, we do look to the exterior cameras. We can see Stephan Wessels making a recovery drive at this point and trying to come up through the order, and he does need to deal with this traffic, what he would consider traffic, but he's being patient here, waiting for that opportunity on the start for this straight, which I think is very sensible as they run through. But we can see Boever and also Lammet both into the pit, and well, with that, both of them coming on in. Now it's all going to be about the race to have the fastest pit stop out the two of them as they make their way on. Time it now, ladies and gentlemen, who's going to emerge the victor in the pit stop race? We see literally both of them there coming in, and as they get service, well, they are the closest battle on circuit right now. Will it be Boever? Will it be Lammet? As we can see both drivers, they're not taking a change of tyres, both down, not on the jacks, and they're just having fuel put in the car. And just before the 27-minute mark here, who will it be as Paul Scott and Paul Williams also coming to the pit lane? We're still waiting waiting on the two of them. Who is going to emerge the winner of this pit stop battle? But as we do, we see out there Paul Scott and also Paul Williams, and it's going to be DD Vlaming who comes out ahead of Lamet Wedder in the end. And in fact, Lamet Wedder is up on the jacks. They are going for a tyre change in the end, and I think that might be a little bit of a mistake there. It's on the front jacks by the looks of things, and DD Vlaming has gained, and well, for Vlaming it has worked out very nicely indeed, and that is up into P3. What we suspect will be P2 when Schultz Scooter comes into the pits for the Belgian driver here, and his teammate Jeremy De Boever just behind him as they make the way on around. But meanwhile, speaking of making its way around onto another lap, here is your race leader overall, and in what is the LMP2 AM class, and that is Paul Walton, who the RD Sim Sport driver, absolutely flying right now and opening up an ever-increasing gap to Paul Scott, who is P2 in class. We just had clarification from Stephan Wessels himself that at this point he does have times 23 in terms of instant points, so that is going to be likely a drive-through penalty at some point later in this race, which Wessels will have to serve, which is unfortunate. But meanwhile, looking from our race leader in the LMP2 class to a battle that started to really come to fruition further down in the same class. We can see here Sam Holman all over the back of Paul Williams. Both of these drivers have served their initial pit stop. Holman looking up the inside of Williams. He goes very heavy on the brakes on the inside here. Paul Williams being very smart, and he gets bunched up behind what is Wedder and Mills there, the two GT3 drivers, and Holman. Well, I think it's the case he came around the corner and thought, right, I've got the move done, and then pretty full on second inspection. Oh, bugger, I've got a load of GT3s who are going quite slowly, but again, Paul Williams being very patient here, the Team Tetra Rouge driver, and not rushing to pass the GT3s until he's on the straights. Now, I wonder whether Paul Williams here feels that this is going to be a two-stop race for most of the LMP2 drivers, and he's deciding to try and turn it into a one-stop because he's running at a very gradual pace. He's not running slowly, but he's being very cautious in his approach to this race. And we did see, to be fair, for those of you who were tuned in since the start, you may recall back at Road Atlanta when Paul Williams gained massively on the strategy by, if I remember correctly, doing a one-stop, whereas the majority of his opponents did a two-stop. The Team Tetra Rouge driver, once again, I think is trying to demonstrate that again here today. Meanwhile, in P2, we have Paul Scott here, another member of the Next Gen Racing family, and as he rolls on through the right-hander of turn number one, it is the case that you can see Sam Holman not too far behind, and Paul Scott, I think, has really been caught up in traffic recently, the GT3 traffic, and that has cost him very dearly as they roll on through. We are hearing, by the way, that Jeremy De Boever has found his way past DD Vlaming for P2 in the GT3 Pro class. The two of them have swapped places, but right now, Paul Scott, he is rolling on up behind what is there. Well, I believe that is Baz Meacham, who's a lap down on the pair of them, and as they come down to the heavy braking zone here, well, Sam Holman will come on through as well, and of course I think Holman might be a little bit cautious being near Meacham, given the fact that the two of them came to blows earlier on at turns 1 and 2 in that very nasty moment where we saw Meacham completely miss his braking point and go charging across the road and taking Holman with him at turn number 2. And with half the race complete now, it is all about settling into that rhythm and now really gunning the strategy and looking at the places that can be gained later on. But Holman continues to chase Paul Scott, and Paul Williams 1.6 seconds back. You can see him at the rear of the camera shot, and I think Paul Williams just thinking about the long game here. We'll wait to see how that plays out in practice as we do take a quick sip of water. As our drivers rolling through and continue staying with Sam Holman, we ride on board with the British driver from Hollerton Racing. You can see that difference in lines there through turn number 16. And I think it's the case that Paul Scott is taking slightly slower apex speeds, but trying to hit later apexes as they roll them through. As they come through turn number 1, and you can see this. Oh my good lord, and Sam Holman there right on the limit, and that curb just unsettling the car. He managed to catch it. To be fair to the Hollerton Racing driver, and look how aggressively he is braking into turn number 2. Well, if Holman wanted to take life out of the car, he's definitely done it, but that's how much that run for P2 means to him. Because right now, I think he feels that if he can come home in P2 at the end of this race, that will put him right back up in contention versus Stephan Wessels, who's down in P5 right now. But it is the case that Holman, he's not leaving anything out on the table, and I wonder, driving this aggressively, where it's going to cost him later, as we see Paul Scott there locking up under braking into the hairpin and losing some time as a result. As they make the way in towards the Mercedes arena, at this point you see Paul Scott opens that gap back up as the natural ebb and flow between the machines. We see off circuit there, that is RJ Kregel, who's simply pulled to the side, and Holman's going to have to go round all the way round RJ Kregel here, has to lift off a bit, but keeps it together in the end. As they make the one through, that's cost Holman quite dearly, as now he is down by 1.1 seconds versus Paul Scott, and he's got to close it up once more. But as we look from our LMP2 AM drivers, we do look down to our GT3 Pro drivers, to Lucas Romano, your leader in the class here, who's running comfortably up front by 8.5 seconds versus Jeremy De Boever, and right now the RP Motorsport Pro AM driver, he's in the perfect place, running a very comfortable race all the way through and just continuing to soldier on to the end. But hold up a second, what am I hearing it? Oh my goodness, and that's Paul Scott, and is the case. I think he's been involved in an incident with Peter Lemkins. Lemkins looks as though he's been in the water, so I think the two of them have come together, but Paul Scott in that incident, that has released Sam Holman up into P2 in the LMP2 AM class, and also Paul Williams is now up into P3, and Stephan Wessels gains a place here, now P4, and charging on all the same is Stephan Wessels, the Racing Team Astra Blue drive. Of course, Ricardo is now fixed, he's used his fast repair, and he's going hunting, but do keep in mind, due to his instant count, if he hasn't already served it, he is likely to be serving a drive-through penalty later in this race. And right now I think Wessels will be hunting down Williams and Holman. And looking at lap times, the only driver who is matching Stephan Wessels in the class right now, well, you probably guessed the name already, that is our race leader, Paul Walton. The two of them exchanging lap times as if it's going out of style, and meanwhile Sam Holman and Paul Williams, well, they are the best part on that last lap. Sam Holman was 2 seconds slower, Paul Williams was 3 seconds slower, but they were both impeded by GT3 class traffic, so it's not an immediate indication, but we will wait and see how those lap times continue to play out over the course of the next couple of laps. But Wessels definitely on a charge as they make their way around into the second half of this race. A bit further back in class, we can see Jonathan Collins here making his way past Paul Scott in the LMP2 that is limping there, and Jonathan Collins up to P5 as the privateer here. We had a very difficult sprint race, but has turned things around so far in this feature as he makes his way past some of the GT3 drivers there, Martini Gutierrez, and coming up behind Lambert Wedder and Davide Favo in short order. As he makes way through, we see it there, that is Lambert Wedder deciding to do a bit of rally cross to get out of the way of Collins, and as they come through turn number 12, we get to look all the way down to Gareth Mills, who is closing up to the back of Liam Tack here in the battle for P9 in the GT3 AM class, and it looks as though both drivers there have had a difficult race so far, as into the pits comes Arjan Kregel from what was at the time P7 in the class, and Gareth Mills all over the back of Liam Tack, who peels onto the pit, and we see the GM Racing driver gains another place, and I think he's going to gain another one shortly after, and that will be taken off of Arjan Kregel. I think Mills has already made his scheduled stop and will not need to make another come at the end of this race. So he's gained a few places and hunting after Mark Sykes, who's now 15 seconds up the road. As into the pits, out my commentary box window, here's Peter Lemkins and also Paul Scott, the two drivers involved in that incident coming out the final corner, and both of them with their races in a state of disrepair as the time continues to tick on down. But with Gareth Mills making his way on to another lap, we do look from him to Lorenzo Gutierrez, and in terms of where Gutierrez is, we can see him here battling right now with Lambert Wedder in the battle for the GT3 class track position. Gutierrez right up the inside there. Lambert Wedder, I think, saying, well, can you just give me the run round the corner? And Gutierrez saying, no, I've got my nose in there, thank you very much. The two of them side by side here, and Mark Baker cuts the inside of the pair of them in the LMP2 machine. He was clear of this battle as they make the way through. They're battling between class here, Gutierrez the AM versus Wedder the Pro, and Wedder's not giving this up here. He doesn't want to lose this track position, although he has overcooked it on the run out to turn number 8. There a bit of wheel spin, a bit of elbow contact there for Gutierrez on Wedder, and I think Gutierrez now gained the place. You can see Wedder flashing his lights there, not too happy with the rubbing, but as they make the way through number 11, the Racing Team Astra orange driver has gained the place, and I think for him, he feels so he's got the pace to be hunting down the next driver up the road, and that is Davide Favo, who, as we look a little bit further up, here is the Racing Team Astra orange driver in his own Lamborghini Huracan, 3.54 seconds, and closing is Gutierrez to the back of Davide Favo as they roll up through the corners. As they make their way onto another lap in short order, Mark Baker coming on through there. It is the case that Davide Favo is the best part of 13.5 seconds down on James Slates. And here is the RP Motorsport Pro AM driver as he makes his way down through the Parabolica curve and onwards towards the Spitzigera curve as he makes his way all the way out towards the hairpin at turn number 6. And as he heads down here in a bit of a no man's land, he is 5 seconds down on Navarro de Boever, 13 seconds ahead of Davide Favo. Is he really gaining or losing? Well, he gained that last lap 1.5 seconds on Navarro de Boever, but that could have been a bit of a traffic situation. You see Navarro de Boever offered the distance there, and James Slates is gradually taking time out of him, but we'll wait and see how it averages out over the course of the next couple of laps. As Mark Baker finds his way past there. We did say earlier about Stephan Wessels was on a charge. We do look back to what is the Racing Team Astra Blue driver as he's tucked in behind Paul Scott, who is a lap down. But I can tell you the last couple of laps, Wessels has been taking on average at least a second if not 1.5 seconds, out to Sam Holman and Paul Williams. So Wessels right now is definitely on a mission to recover to P2, but can he do it? That will be the big question. He's had a nightmare of a day here at the Hockenheimring, it has to be said, particularly in this feature race. It has not worked out, and now he's looking to try and bring it on home as best as he can as he makes his way down towards turn number 2. As he comes roaring on down here, staying tucked in behind Paul Scott. Might be doing a little bit of fuel saving here behind Paul Scott, to be fair, before he gets on to that straight, and he'll be looking to make the move up into the hairpin, which would make sense given the fact he can use the toe here to do some fuel savings. The toe will give him a huge amount of speed advantage by default. And as they make the way on down, you can see he peels out towards the inside here, but he's not close enough to go for the pass of Paul Scott. He will have to wait until later on the lap, or alternatively a case on another lap, as Baz Beecham has retired from this race from what we're hearing, so he will be classified P8 in the LMP2 AM stands, but he won't be getting any points as far as the race. He hasn't made at least 75% of the race distance. I think that is how the ruling works, but we can see here Wessels looking up the inside of Paul Scott, and that is to make his way past Paul Scott, who is a lap down. But as Wessels continues his crusade, we do look to Paul Williams, and Paul Williams running on average compared to his peers right now at least a second, if not 2 seconds, off the fastest laps of the LMP2 class, and that I do wonder is a sign of whether he's doing a lot of fuel saving here and trying to avoid a second pit stop, which would make sense, to be fair, for Paul Williams. And we did talk about that earlier, very tactical driver, perhaps the ultimate brains and smarts out on the circuit, thinking about how can he save fuel, how can he avoid an extra pit stop. We will keep our eyes on what Paul Williams is planning. I'm sure it's going to be revealed in the near future. But looking from him to what is our GT3 AMs, we do look to Tristan De Boever, as here comes our GT3 AM leader, tucked in behind Mark Sykes right now, the GT3 AM driver in P9, and Tristan De Boever is going to be lapping Mark Sykes in short order, as we see Mark Sykes there peeling off to the inside of the circuit, and De Boever comes on through. But De Boever right now playing everything right. He does have a 19-second advantage over his main rival in P2, and that is Jeremy De Boever. And De Boever here continues to build that momentum. And really, there was a big question over Tristan De Boever at the start of this season. And for those who did not tune in at Watkins Glen and also at Road Atlanta, we saw that Tristan De Boever looked very fast out of the starting blocks in qualifying and also in the races. But there was just one major problem. And that major problem, simply put, was that there was not a considerable amount of consistency. It was the case that De Boever would have a fantastic result, and then the next result, it would not be anywhere near as close. But since Daytona, where he picked up a great result, and coming to the Red Bull Ring, and now here at the Hockenheimring, that consistency is really starting to shine on through. And you can imagine now, with that consistency being married to the pace he's demonstrating, he's really started to build that campaign momentum and taking the fight to Jeremy De Boever. Now, of course, the thing with Jeremy De Boever is the reverse story going through this round right now. And the fact that Jeremy De Boever has been the most consistent, it could be argued, of our GT3 AM class drivers. But now that Tristan De Boever has activated the consistency with his superior pace to Jeremy De Boever, I think they were challenged by DB2 driver at this point in time. Assuming that things finish as they are today, and De Boever does not drop it or get involved in an instant, I think Jeremy De Boever, when he comes away from the German circuit come the end of tonight, it will be the case that he'll be thinking, right, I need to work on the pace. I've got the consistency now down, but De Boever does seem to have, on average, what looks to be around a 3 to 5 tenths of a second pace advantage on average on a flying lap, and that is what is making the difference between the two of them. But to be fair for Jeremy De Boever, he is learning considerably and constantly pushing the boundaries. And so we can't say that he's not trying hard. Indeed, one person who's trying very hard right now to catch up to him is James Slates here in the RP Motorsport Chrome Audi R8 as he rolls on through at turn number 1 and heading down towards turn number 2 here. It's the case with 20 minutes to go, or 19 by the time he's cleared turns 2 through to 4. The Audi R8 driver is pushing as hard as he dares, and well, his lap times, to give you an idea, the last lap from James Slates at 38.1, last lap from Jeremy De Boever at 38.8. He took the best part of almost what was their 8 attempts out of Jeremy De Boever. He is flying this Slates, and it's brilliant to see. As he comes down towards the hairpin here, we can see Mark Baker coming on through. We've seen a lot of instances of Mark Baker coming through the GT3 class traffic, as we're hearing that Sam Holman is into the pit lane. Now this is very interesting. Now, is this a scheduled stop for Holman? He's had a slight off earlier on, but nothing major, because Paul Williams will go up to P2 in the LMP2 AM class here, and I think it is a scheduled stop for Holman. And with that in mind, will that mean that Wessels moves up to P3? Will we be seeing another pit stop from anybody else, or will it be the case that everything settles down as it is, because Wessels comes on through, and this is definitely a scheduled stop for Holman, because you can see there, and he's just left the pit lane. That's fuel going in the car, only fuel. That is a quick stop, but Holman needed the fuel, and he's lost the time and track position to Williams and also to Wessels as they made their way through it. And you can see Jonathan Collins here, who's going to have an opportunity. I don't think he's going to be close enough. I think he's going to have to try and snatch it on the brakes up into turn number 6, but right now Jonathan Collins will see the fact he's not too far behind P4 man Sam Holman, and he'll think, right, I can go for this. And he makes his way past Lucas Romano, the GT3 Pro class leader, and now Collins charging on down, flashing his lights there, I think to say thank you to what is Lucas Romano, and also to try and get into the head of Sam Holman. But I don't think at that distance he's going to be seeing too much in terms of what is the lights there as they make their way through the right-hand return at number 6. And indeed, a fair point at Stephan Wessels, the incident between what was Sam Holman and Baz Beecham on lap 1 at turn 2. We did see that happen where Baz Beecham completely missed his braking soda, coming across the corner like a ball in a china shop and sending Holman with him off the circuit. And now Holman really having to press on here and recover the race, but he's doing very well with Sam Holman to recover the P4 so far, as Jonathan Collins just gets it a bit wrong, a little bit too much steering up by looks of things, and some snap oversteer as he comes out of turn number 10. And Collins, you can see how much he was pushing to close up to Holman, but he's pushed a bit too hard, and that's cost him dearly, and he'll have to try and recover and recuperate that pace once more. As meanwhile, a bit further down the order, we see Sean Scooter here battling with Gus Franken. We ride on board here with the Racing Team Astro Blue driver from South Africa as he goes hunting after Gus Franken, charging down towards turn number 6. Now, we would expect here the Ferrari is not going to be as strong on the straight versus the Mercedes in front, but to be fair, in the tow, the Ferrari does come alive a little bit. Now coming into the braking zone here, Scooter not close enough to lunge the inside. Instead, he waits and decides to take a nice wide line, gets a good run through the hairpin there, but gets a bit too close to the back of Gus Franken. As a result, has to wait to get on the power. They are as they were as they make their way up into the right-hander of turn number 7. And Paul Williams in the YouTube chat there asking, did Sam Holman pit twice? He did indeed. He has pitted twice in this race so far as the drivers make their way on through and head into turn number 10. Now as they roll on through here, John Scooter continues to pursue, but you can see they're having to lift through turn 10 due to the dirty air over the back of the Mercedes in front as Paul Williams comes on through here and just introduces himself into the camera shot, and Paul Williams now looks up the inside into turn 12. So it will be the case that this battle is neutralised in terms of the amount of gain and loss because of Paul Williams' involvement. He's caught both drivers into corners, and now John Scooter really looking for that run as they come through 15. He's got a good run through the first apex. What about the apex of 16? It is a good one for Scooter. This could be his chance as he comes out the corner here and makes his way down towards turn number 1. We can see that Stephan Wessels coming on through in pursuit of Paul Williams. Scooter looks to the inside. He's not close up here. It's to back off, but it's a case of bounce. Sorry, not bounce. Franken's made a mistake, and as they make the way down towards turn number 2, it's going to be side by side. Scooter on the inside, Franken on the outside, and as they go into braking here, Scooter's going to take a very tight line. Franken decides to go for the cutback, but now it'll be the drag race all the way down to turn number 6, and as they roar on down, who is going to have the master of the top end speed? Well, you could see that Franken's too far back. I think Sean Scooter has got it done versus Gus Franken in absolutely brilliant style, getting Gus Franken to make a mistake into turn 1 and then not letting him recover cleanly onto the circuit. Instead, just deciding he's going to pin him to the outside, not give him the chance to go defensive, but then Gus Franken gives him that little bit of a tap on the rear end there, but I think it is all said and done. I think it's all she wrote for that battle for the time being. Sean Scooter up into the top 5 for the GT3 Pro class with 15 minutes to go. But meanwhile, we look from them to the battle for P2 in the GT3 AM class, and we can see James Slates here closing up to the back of P2 driver De Boever as they roll through and come to the end of what for them was lap 27. And they go on to lap 28, and as they head into turn number 1, will we see a similar situation here? I think Navarro De Boever is going to be less likely to make a mistake through turn 1. He's not made a mistake there so far, but James Slate's looking very aggressive as well as they come down to the braking zone. He looks the inside as the RP Motorsport Pro owned driver, but it's just a feint of a move. They're trying to get into Navarro De Boever's head, trying to make him go deeper into the corner, thinking he's got to give space. That lunge is coming. That lunge never came, and instead it's the case they stay as they were as we run aboard the gearbox here of the Ferrari driver. Now down the straight, to be fair, the Audi and the Ferrari will be similar in terms of top end speed. There's not going to be too much of a gain or loss. And as they come down to the braking zone for the hairpin, you can see Navarro De Boever just taking it nice and easy, nursing the car through the corner as they roll it through the right-hander, and now they make their way down towards turn 7. A little bit of snap oversteer on the exit, or power oversteer for what is James Slates there versus Navarro De Boever. And as they make their way through the right-hander, it is the case the Audi R8 driver looking for that opportunity, but he's got to get close and he's got to find a bit more confidence in getting the power down, because that Audi very sensitive when the tyres start getting worn in terms of putting the power down aggressively as they roll through turn number 10 and head up towards 11. It's the case the gap stays at about 5 tenths as they make their way into the stadium section here in front of the crowd, and as they roll them through, it does look as though James Slates has fallen back for the time being, but as they make their way through turn number 12, Navarro De Boever takes a huge amount of apex curve there, turns him way too early, and that cost him very dearly in terms of the run. In fact, Slates has now got within 4 tenths for that one mistake from Navarro De Boever. The pressure is building as they make their way through 15 and 16, and as they come through the long right hand here, you can see James Slates waited to strike, but not able to find his way on through as they head down in towards turn number 1. But as they come on through, you can see Navarro De Boever there runs a little bit wide. That's not going to cost him or give him too many instant points of running wide. But as they make their way down into turn number 2, it is business as usual. Into the pits comes Stephan Wessels, and I believe this is for a drive-through penalty for accumulating more than 20 instant points as per the rules. Although I'm not entirely sure, as he does make his way in. I think that's actually coming into his pit box there. It might be a stop and go, unless I'm very much mistaken, or is he having the car serviced? But either way, Wessels into the pits. Now, where is Sam Holman? Here is Sam Holman at P4. It's going to be a battle with Wessels as they make their way down. Wessels coming out the pit lane already. Sam Holman's got to go through turn 1. It's going to be very close between the two of them, and Holman up into P3. Can Wessels come back into turn 2? I don't think so. I think he's a little bit too close as they make their way through the right-hander. But as they do, and we've had confirmation there from Wessels in the chat that was for fuel. It was not due to a penalty. It was to take on fuel in the car. So Stephan Wessels will now be going on the offensive, and Paul Williams, based on the pace he's showing right now and the fact that he is 24 seconds up the road, I think Paul Williams is going for the one stop here and trying to rob everybody of P2 outside of Paul Walton, who is the race leader in the LMP2 AM class, of course, but making that one stop work at this time. As we can see here, Sam Holman under pressure from Wessels, who is going on the offensive as they make their way down in towards what is a turn. Down into turn number 8, and I've actually had it confirmed that it's 25 instant points it would seem for the drive-through penalty, not 20, so we'll get that updated next time we do bring you the broadcast. And thank you for confirming, Stefan, with regards to a little bit of confusion there, and the fact your time's 24 at this point. But as we see, Wessels here very close, and well, we can't take chances here. One little bump, scrape or track limit is going to put him across the borderline in terms of picking up that drive-through penalty as he makes his way through at the corners. And as he does so here, where will he look for that move? We ride on board with Stephan Wessels as he just looks to try and find an opportunity to get himself back into the podium. You can see then the dirty air of Sam Holman's LMP2 in front and just having no front end rotation as they make the way into turn 1. He rolls the car through, bouncing across the exit curve there, but Holman are keeping it at bay for the time being. And as they come in towards the hairpin once more, the turn 2 hairpin, no change. But what I can tell you is that whilst this is happening, Paul Williams has had a spin at what is turn number 2 there. He's brought it back together, but it's cost him a bit of time. And meanwhile, in the battle for P2 in the GT3 AM class, the battle's ongoing still. James Slates, then Navarro De Boever up the inside into turn 8, and Navarro De Boever getting a little bit of an elbow as he tried to turn on in, and James Slates said, no, I'm already there, you're not going to be able to turn through me, thank you very much. And James Slates is up into P2 in the class, and now can he run away with it, or will Navarro De Boever come on back and try to take the position off of him with 10 minutes to go as they roll him through into turn number 12. And you can see that James Slates going a little bit deep, and Navarro De Boever trying to creep it up the inside, but I don't think that was going to happen as they roll them through. Hermann Wessels has just passed Holman, who's had an off circuit, but as they make their way down in towards turn number 16 right now, James Slates are looking to have the advantage over Navarro De Boever. As they make their way down towards turn number 1, you can see Paul Williams just coming on through very gradually here. Very smart with his placement, Paul Williams, in terms of navigating through the GT3 traffic, and as a result not really hurting any of the GT3 battles here, neutralising the gaps. And Navarro De Boever, well, he's now got to try and find a way back versus James Slates here. And De Boever, of course, wants to finish second. When you're battling with your championship rival of what is Tristan Niederreger, if you can't be anywhere near him when he's going to win, you need to finish P2 to mitigate the advantage he takes into the next round. And Navarro De Boever will be very aware of that as he makes his way down in towards the braking zone for turn number 6. Can he find a way back past James Slates? Not this time. He's going to have to wait very patiently here. He's still got some time to go, to be fair. He's got approximately 6 more laps after this one, so he will have an opportunity if he can stay this close for the remainder of the time. That is to be seen as they roll them through. Meanwhile, where is your GT3 AM leader, I hear you ask? Well, Tristan Dino Brega is the best part of 26.5 seconds up the road and making his way towards the end of his current lap and onto another one as he comes through turns 15 and 16. And the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, well, he's pretty much, since the start of this one, just charged through the order, and then once he's taken the lead of the class, he's disappeared off into the distance with it, and he's never given it back. And right now, I think in his mind, he's just going to keep putting the laps in and not look to make any major errors from this point onwards, because it is looking very comfortable for him, much like it is for Lucas Romano, the GT3 Pro class leader, who right now is 18.2 seconds clear of Didi Valemi, the P2 driver in class, and the RP Motorsport Pro Am driver. Well, he'll be very happy to be on the top step, and this time I think he would argue that unlike some of the luck he saw what was the Red Bull Ring, particularly in that feature race where he'd had a disaster of the race and came through to win it through some of the most odd circumstances that we've seen today in this series, in terms of drivers having incidents at the worst possible moment. Lucas Romano, meanwhile, this time has surged his way up through the order, and since being in the front of it has said, you know what, I'm taking this one to the finish line, and looking very comfortable right now as he rolls on through turns 8, 9 and 10. As he heads on through there, we do look a bit further down the order to Gus Franken. So after that battle earlier on with what was, a battling with Sean Scudder. Scudder has moved at 7.7 seconds clear, and now Gus Franken continues to press on here, making his way through turn number 1. Runs it a little bit wide there through the corner as Kurt Van Hoornacker is tucked in behind. Kurt Van Hoornacker in the GT3 AM class. They're battling for track position, but not for class position, because they're in two separate classes. But as they roll their way on through, look as though Gus Franken here may yield to Van Hoornacker in the near future. That Mercedes not looking too comfortable. We will wait and see. But as they head on through the corners, what I can tell you is starting to develop is the fact that Stephan Wessels here in P3 has found his way past Sam Holman. That happened, of course, when Sam Holman had the off track, but Wessels has now got to try and run away from Holman as he makes his way up into turn 12 here, but being very cautious around the GT3 class traffic. He doesn't want to pick up any more instant points, as we're hearing that Gareth Mills has come into the pits and just left the pits in the GT3 AM class down in P7 in class. But right now, Stephan Wessels just taking it as smooth as he possibly can, and Sam Holman trying to build that pressure back up as they both roll their way out of the final corner and on to another lap. Not too many laps left now for our drivers in any of the classes. The time is burning down, 6 minutes and counting, and the only major battles out of the circuit at this time are the battle for P3 in the LMP2 AM class. You're seeing it here, Sam Holman chasing after Stephan Wessels, and then the battle for P2 in the GT3 AM class, which you're seeing now, and that is James Slade ahead of Navarro De Boever, but Navarro De Boever trying to stay with him and come back at him with only moments of this race remaining. As they head down towards the hairpin this time, you can see how Sam Holman gets him very close to the back of Stephan Wessels under braking, and Wessels making a little mistake there, a little bit of a wobble under braking, and there's a contact between the two of them. I think there was contact between the two, hard to tell from the camera angle, but Holman is on the inside of Wessels here as they roll him through turn number 8, and well, Wessels has backed off there, and the run through 8 up into the run from turn 7 to 8, I should say, and Holman's up into P3, but it did look as though it's a bit of an awkward moment for the pair of them as they make their way on through. And I could tell you that at this time, a bit further down the order, that Lorenzo Gualtieri has got past Davide Favo for P4 in the GT3 AM class. Now Stephan Wessels trying to come back at Holman here as we ride on board the gearbox of the Hollerton Racing driver, Racing Team Astra Blues driver behind, and as they make their way through 13 and 14, Sam Holman smoothly rolling on through here, and Wessels are staying with him right now, but will Wessels be able to find a way back and through? We'll wait to see in short order. But you can see Holman there pulling off the racing line, trying to deny Wessels the toe in the run up towards turn 1. It's only a short run to turn 1, but every little bit of slipstream matters. We're saying that Navarro De Boever has had an off track, which has released him from the battle with James Slates for P2. And we can see here Sam Holman's got Wessels all over his rear. But very different approaches to the turn 2 apex there. Holman going in more gently compared to Wessels, but both drivers gaining that pace as they make their way down towards turn number 6 once again. As they head on down this time, Wessels only 4 attempts back and trying to close up. Of course, he will be looking for a different approach, where Wessels staying at the toe there for a good amount of time, and I think that's a good reason to try and avoid picking up an overspeed into the hairpin and therefore taking more life out of the brakes and the tyres under braking. And as they make the way in towards the Mercedes section of the arena, coming into turns 7 and 8 now, Holman still there. The gap between them and Paul Williams in front at 19 seconds, and Paul Williams right now, I can tell you, is on a one-stop, much like Paul Walton. They are both making the one-stop work, and that is absolutely brilliant. As is Mark Baker, to be fair, down in what is P5 in the class, but Sam Holman here on a 2-stop, much like Wessels, they come through the corners. It is very close between the two of them as they make the way up into turn number 12 once again. Ahead of them, Paul Scott, who is a lap down, finds his way past Didi Blaming, the GT3 Mercedes driver who you see there in the distance. And in fact, he's at the head of the camera shot now as the camera pans around. Blaming giving a boat. Well, he's gave Holman the space. Wessels, however, has to wait patiently here, and that's going to cost Wessels the run down towards turn 1, which is unfortunate for Stephan Wessels. He'll have to try and build that momentum back up once again. 3 minutes to go by the time they make the way through turn number 2, and that means with 3 minutes remaining, only 2 more laps. Well, in fact, 3 more laps to the pair here, with the fact that we've got Paul Walton, who is going on to another lap. The race leader overall is just about to go on to what is for him his 39th tour of the circuit. He will have this lap plus 1 more after it as he rolls them through and navigates through some more of the GT3 class traffic. As he makes his way on down, we are hearing that Peter Lemkins has left the pit lane. He is currently last but not least the GT3 Pro class, and I believe he's left the pit lane to go back out on the circuit to finish the race and be classified to take some points home, which is always worthwhile as he makes his way back up to speed. But as he does, we can see a number of other drivers coming on through, and as they do, we look back up to Holman and Wessels here, the close battle between the two of them, as the Hockenheimring Racing driver here holding a gap of 8/10 of a second, and as they make the way out of what was turn number 10 up into 11 here, I think it's the case that Holman, if he can keep this together, this would be a big result, a P3 up against a very fierce contender as they make the way up into turn number 12. Indeed, Holman looking to take those points where he can as he rolls them through, but Wessels coming on close here as they make the way through the course. We ride on board with Stephan Wessels, who is with 2 laps remaining as Holman goes a bit deep into 15, and as they roll them through 16, Wessels not able to capitalise as much as he would like, but Holman definitely started to show signs of falling off the cliff as they make the way into turn 1. It's penultimate lap time for these two as they make the way up through the opening corner. Down towards turn 2 they go, and as they do here, you can see Wessels looking to inside, not able to find the space to make the lunge. He's not close enough, and as they make the way through 2, 3 and up into 4 before the long parabolica curve, you can see it is the case that this time Wessels is much closer. He's gaining. Holman pulls to the right, he weaves to the left. Holman trying to break the toe. He's allowed 1 weave, but no more than that. And as they make the way down, Holman's now going to pin himself to the outside, to the inside, I should say. And Wessels going to look round the outside here. Holman goes as late as he can on the brakes. There's a lock up there for Holman, and Wessels with the cut back here. He's timed it to perfection. Now, will he get the run? Coming out of turn number 6 up into 7. Will he hold the inside? He goes into it, into the corner of turn 7 on the inside. He'll be on the outside into 8. Holman comes onto the inside here, and as they roll through, there's a little bit of contact, I think, between the two of them, or at least a knock between the two. Well, Wessels had to open the steering wheel, and if that is contact, how much damage will that be for the two? And we can see that Holman has retaken the place here, but I think that might be the case. There may be an argument for the contact being a little bit of a push to pass. In fact, Holman has lifted off there. To be fair to Sam Holman, he's shown respect for the fact that he did give Stephan Wessels the push off the circuit as they make the way through. It's a recovery to PV for Stephan Wessels right now as he rolls on through, but does he have a drive-through penalty? And he does for the contact between the two of them. That's taking him over the instant point tally, and Wessels right now, that is going to hurt him massively, and Sam Holman right now must be thinking, oh Lord, what have I just done? Alternatively, is he aware of the fact that he's essentially given Wessels a drive-through penalty with that little bit of a nudge? Well, that is to be determined, ladies and gentlemen, but we must look to Paul Walton, because as he comes out the final corner, he's led this one from the early stages to the finish. Paul Walton is your winner in the feature for RD Simsport in the LMP2 AM class here in Lobby 2 of the Proto GT3 Championship. A brilliant start to finish drive for Paul Walton in a class of his own, and as we see here, it will be Paul Williams who's got a way to go yet. He is the best part of what is about 40 seconds down on Paul Walton, and right now he is making his way to the finish, and Paul Williams pressed it on, but much like Paul Walton, he's made the one-stop work as he comes on through, and well, Paul Walton will be very pleased with that. But what a return to the series of Paul Williams, a P4 in the sprint, and it's going to be a P2 in the feature here. Of course, there's been a number of incidents which has seen big players drop out. But at the end of the day, you have to avoid the incidents and bring the car all the way to the finish. It will be P2 for Paul Williams in a brilliant one-stop strategy there, the Team Tetrarouge driver. And then as for Sam Holman, well, as he makes his way through turn number 12, I think he will be feeling to himself that the contact between himself and Stephan Wessels really should lead to Wessels taking that P3. But at the end of the day, Wessels has had that drive-through penalty for the instant points. And as Holman comes out the final corner, it will be P3 in the LMP2 class for the Hockenheimring Racing driver. Just ahead of him, Lucas Romano is your winner in the GT3 Pro class in the feature. A brilliant drive from Lucas Romano coming through the field and really making his statement of his pace in the GT3 Pro class field. And it is Tristan Di Nobrega who is your winner in the GT3 AM class in a superb drive for the Racing Team Astra Blue driver. Much like Lucas Romano in the Pro class, it is the GT3 AM driver who really is making the big statements today. Meanwhile, P2 in the GT3 Pro class is Jeremy De Boever here, as he comes across the line. A superb drive from changed by DB1 driver, really picking up the points that have been dropped by his teammate Jeremy De Boever, who in the end finishes P3 in class. A brilliant recovery drive for them changed by DB1 driver. And meanwhile, in the GT3 AM class, in terms of the rest of the podium, James Slates with a brilliant drive from the back of the field to second in the GT3 AM class. Congratulations to the RP Motorsport Pro Am driver, and Navarro De Boever coming home in what was P3 in the end. Wasn't able to make it P2, but still a valiant effort for them changed by DB2 driver. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at those race results, subject to any stewards' inquiries here, of course, and I think there's going to be quite a few of them. So, after the second race today at the Hockenheimring Grand Prix circuit in the IMB Raceway lobby for the Proto GT3 Championship round number 6, the results are as follows. Paul Walton taking the win in the end by 52 seconds over Paul Williams in P2, and Sam Holman completing the LMP2 AM class podium there ahead of Stephan Wessels and Mark Baker. Then Jonathan Collins and Paul Scott rounding off the finishers in the LMP2 AM class. Behind them, Lucas Romano there, P8 overall, and that is first in the GT3 Pro class. Another brilliant win for Lucas Romano, ahead of Tristan Di Nobrega, the winner of the GT3 AM class, and a superb lights to finish drive for Tristan Di Nobrega, ahead of Jeremy De Boever, who came home in second in the GT3 Pro class. And then it's James Slates and Navarro De Boever completing the GT3 AM podium, ahead of Jeremy De Boever completing the GT3 Pro podium there in P13. Lambert Weddle with a P4 finish of the GT3 Pro class. He was P14 overall. A great result there for the Lamborghini driver. Lorenzo Gualtieri P15. Davide Favo P16 completing the top 5 for the GT3 AM class. And then Sean Scudder P17 completed the top 5 for the GT3 Pro class. And behind him, Kurt Van Hoenacker. And further down the order, but not to be forgotten about, Gus Franken P19, Dirtbouts P20. And then outside the top 20, Gareth Mills, Elwin Sykes, Mark Sykes, Liam Tack, Peter Lemkins, Baz Meacham, Arjen Kregel, and last but not least, Jack Wyborn there in P28. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a brief breather and get ready for our post-round interviews. We'll have a couple of those lined up for you, there's no doubt about that. But until then, don't go too far because you won't want to miss them. Indeed, we will have some interviews with some of our drivers who can give you an insight as to how their rounds at the Hockenheimring went. Stay tuned, we'll be back shortly. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we're ready to kick off our post-round interviews of our drivers. We've only got 2 drivers lined up for today, and interestingly enough, it's going to be one Paul interviewing 2 Pauls, because we will be interviewing Paul Walton, the number 98 driver in the LMP2 AM class, and then Paul Williams, the number 7 driver in the LMP2 AM class. And I think there's a little bit of a running joke right now down in the paddock with regards to if only we could get 2 more Pauls in to make up the full interview complement, perhaps Paul Scott and then one other Paul, or we could rename someone Paul for the purposes of tonight, but still a little bit of interest there. But it'll be interesting to hear from both drivers, who both in particular in the feature race conducted the one-stop strategy and made it work very well. But without further ado, let's bring in our dominant driver for tonight, and that was Paul Walton. Let's bring him on in to the interview room. So as we bring Mr. Walton in now, Paul, 2 back-to-back wins tonight in the LMP2 AM class at the Hockenheimring. It wasn't easy, particularly in the sprint. You had the pressure from Stephan Wessels, but you just seemed to have the pace to deliver time and time again. How do you feel that the German circuit treated you tonight?
Honestly, it was a surprise. I came into this race not expecting much. I couldn't really keep up with pace in practice. I was getting off tracks everywhere. I mean, I think at one point I was doing like 1x per lap in the practice sessions, and I just couldn't. So I feel like I got lucky with a lot of other people getting unlucky, but I was able to keep the pace up, keep it clean, and then just run away with it, I guess.
Well, indeed, and dissecting that, particularly in qualifying, we did see the back and forth between yourself and Stephan Wessels, but in the end you take in pole position. It seems as though you're able to hook the lap up in qualifying, but I do have to ask, was that the perfect lap in the end, or was it a case you felt there was more out there?
It was probably the only clean lap I was able to get. I think I had about three or four of my laps actually impeded by traffic. So I was just grateful to get a clean lap in the end, and luckily it was the one to beat Wessels by, what was it, 5,000ths of a second or something like that.
Indeed, it was a very close margin in qualifying. I have to ask, given how close you two qualified to one another in terms of times, what was the thought process going into the sprint? Because surely, given how close it is between you two in terms of pace, but you've got to close up to Wessels in the championship, you must have been thinking, I've got to hold him off into turn 2.
Actually, he got a better start than me on the green. I think I was sleeping, but in the end, it ended up working out for me because of the way the track's laid out. The best place to be is in P2 or P3 because of the long run into turn 5. Is it the hairpin? Yeah, just easy long run down there and got him back.
And then having got ahead of Stephan Wessels, we saw the gap between the two of you for the most part stayed around the region of a second. Were you at that point having to, I presume, really push hard but also manage the pace? Or was it the case you had no time to think about lap times, just keep gunning it and trying to hold him off for as long as possible?
I was pushing hard until we got to the traffic, and then I realized that I just had to stay alive. And luckily, I stayed alive faster than he did. So
So then transferring that over into the feature, of course, having taken the win, you started at the back of the LMP2 AM class for the feature. What was the strategy going into the race?
because it's an hour-long race, usually you can filter through the traffic fairly quickly. That sounds bad, me saying that. But just don't get caught up in first lap incidents. Slowly work through, and then once you're through, focus on maintaining the pace and keeping it clean.
Indeed, and we did see you deploy a one-stop strategy compared to a number of your peers who did 2 stops there. Was the plan always to go for the one-stop and fuel save, or was that something you thought of on the way round?
While I was working through the traffic, I was fuel saving a little bit, just trying to keep the usage down. But once we got to the midway point, I was well in the window for a one stop, and I didn't have to fuel save anymore, so I could just kind of go full speed ahead.
Well, indeed, and it showed up very well in terms of that speed you're deploying, and in the end, the gap opening up to the best part of 52 seconds at the finish line. I do have to ask, when you crossed the line and looked back at the gap you had to the rest of your colleagues, what were you thinking at that point? Was it surely this is something that's sort of Hamilton-esque in terms of the gap?
I would say that if I hadn't driven past a handful of LMP2s with not straight wings, I think I was the only one in the end who didn't have to use my fast repair, and I'm grateful for that. but at the same time, it doesn't feel great knowing that everyone else died and I didn't.
Well, indeed, understandable. But at the end of the day, staying clear of the trouble and the incidents is a way to success. And now looking ahead to Monza in a week's time, of course, coming off the back of back-to-back wins, that will put you in closing contention with both Sam Holman and Stephan Wessels for the championship lead. How are you feeling for the Italian circuit of speed?
Oof. Monza's Monza is all I'll say. I'm looking forward to it, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. But yeah, just got to keep pushing forward, keep it clean, and hopefully stay in front of Mr. South American Stephan Wessels.
Well, we'll have to
Sorry,
let's see.
South African.
South African, I was going to
My
say South
apologies.
American.
My apologies. My apologies.
Oh, well, we look forward to seeing you take to the circuit in a week's time. But until then, Paul, congratulations on 2 well-deserved wins today. And thank you for joining us, as always, in the interview room.
Perfect. Thank you. Speak to you later. Bye.
Take care. So hearing there from Paul Walton, and well, he apologised there for the slight mishap with regards to the nationality of his main rival in terms of pace, Stephan Wessels, calling him South American, but actually South African. But it was the case there, Paul Walton in the sprint, a very interesting dynamic between himself and Wessels, and the fact that he lost the lead to Wessels through the opening couple of corners, but then running down through the curve straight up towards the turn 6 hairpin, was able to come back in, and from that point onwards, managed the gap, pushing hard, of course, and then when the GT3 traffic came along, just staying alive, cutting through the traffic. Brilliant back and forth between the two. And then, as he was saying in the feature, really one of the limited number of drivers in the class to avoid any incidents and cut his way through the incidents and making sure not to pick up any damage, and then just managing the car from start to finish, and a very well-deserved win there. And definitely the championship momentum does seem to be with Paul Walton now as he continues to impress day after day. But now we must come to our second driver for the interview this evening, and that is one Paul Williams. As we're about to bring him into the interview room, we'll give us a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen. And Paul Williams, of course, finishing in the end in what was P4 in the sprint and P2 in the feature on his return to the series. And as we do bring Paul Williams into the interview room, Paul, good performance this night across both races, particularly on your return to the series. I do have to ask, were you expected to get 2 top 5s back-to-back, including a podium at the Hockenheimring?
I have to say I wasn't expecting to get a podium today. I was sort of hoping for maybe a 3rd or definitely a 4th. I think it's very clear Paul Walton and Stephan Wessels are really quick. And there's not many of us who can keep close to them in any of these races. So I was very happy to get a P2 for sure.
Oh, definitely. And taking it from qualifying, we seem to see in the qualifying session in particular that you had the pace to really be what I'd argue is the best of the rest. If we treat Walton and Wessels as the 2 leaders, then it's the scramble for P3. But that qualifying session looked really comfortable for yourself. Just take us through, was it the perfect lap or was there more out on the table?
No, there was still a bit more out on the table. I think Paul Walton said it earlier, is that this track is such that it's very easy to pick up an off track during a lap, and so if you push a little bit too hard, it's you almost certainly are going to pick one up. And you saw in the race, Stephan suffered a little bit from getting too many off tracks and too many X's, and so strategy is if you push too hard, you're going to have that problem. So it's probably, I would say, 0.2 left of the table in that qualifying lap, and then after that I couldn't find a gap to be able to do slightly more. So I was happy with that. As you said, best of the rest. I'll take that.
Well, indeed, and then going into the sprint race, we saw quite a scramble at the start through the opening sequence of 6 corners. What was your game plan for the sprint race? Because we saw it was quite a medley going through, particularly the opening hairpin.
I think my game plan with all these races, especially in the first lap, is just to play it safe. I'd rather give up 1 or 2 places than get contact. So it's quite normal for me to lose a couple of places in the first lap. But yeah, the benefit of that is you end up without damage, and you can push harder later in the race. So that's my strategy.
Indeed, and whilst you did lose places, started that recovery drive in the end, and we did see at one point you were looking in contention for P3, but then came up behind some GT3 traffic, and I must say I commented on you being a very gentlemanly driver coming up behind the GT3s, particularly through the arena section, being very patient. Were you thinking to yourself, perhaps I've been a little bit too kind to the GT3s, because you did fall off the back of Holman, and I think it was Collins when they were battling for the P3 position. No, it was Jim Stanton, in fact, when they were battling for P3.
Yeah, I remember that very well from the race. It is frustrating in a way, especially that section. You lose 4 seconds, maybe 4.5 seconds if you're stuck behind a GT3 there. But if you do push it and you do try and take a gap, there's a high chance that you take yourself and somebody else off, and that would ruin their race as well as yours. So yeah, generally, unless I'm really in a battle, I will hold back slightly and rather try and catch them with a bit of pace afterwards.
Oh, indeed, and it worked out in the end, coming home in a P4 in what was a rather instant-free race, and then translating that through into the feature, we saw a very high attrition rate in the LMP2 class in the feature from start to finish. But yourself, you seem to stay out of trouble and just manage the car to a one-stop. Was that always the plan? I know you said earlier about just staying out of trouble. Was the one-stop always the intention, or was it something you decided on the spot?
No, the one stop was always the attention. You can do it without too much trouble in this track to do it, to do a one stop. You don't have to save, fuel too much. If you just keep it smooth and not battle too much, it's completely possible. So, yeah, that was my strategy, and I think a lot of people suffered from contact or a high number of off tracks, and it was my, just keeping a solid, steady pace. It was really good, and I could keep that. I made one small mistake on about 5 or 6 laps from the end. But apart from that, it just lap after lap. It was good. It was good fun, and I quite enjoy the multi-class racing. The GT3s add an extra dimension to the race, and I really enjoy that.
Oh, most definitely. It looked as though you're enjoying yourself out on circuit. And I do have to ask, when you saw you were in P2 with a gap at the time of what was, I believe, about 24 seconds once all the pit stops had calmed down, we think at this point, pinch me, is this real? The fact that you're pretty much in a P2 position with Paul Walton miles up the road, but everybody else really far behind you.
It was a bit of a pinch me. At that point, you start to get nervous about making a mistake. It's so easy to do something and then throw it away. I did that once last season. Got right up and then threw it away. To be honest, the thing I was watching most of all is Stephan Wessels. He's really quick, and you could see him doing a bit of a recovery drive through the field. And I'm thinking, do I have enough gap to stay away from him? In the end, he was unfortunate with the number of off tracks and so on he had. So yeah, it was my day.
Oh, indeed, and taking home that podium to add to the P4 in the sprint. And now looking ahead to Monza in a week's time, the Italian Cathedral of Speed. How are you feeling for the high-speed circuit?
To be honest, I hate that track. I don't know what it is about chicanes, but they're not my friend. And Monza is just a whole bunch of chicanes. So yeah, I'm going to spend a bit of time on the weekend getting a bit of practice in. I've got to figure out how to get this LMP through those chicanes a little bit faster, because the moment is just not my favorite at all. But yeah, it can be fun, and I think everybody knows turn 1 is the danger zone. So again, I think I'll back off and not fight too hard into turn 1 and see where we get to.
Oh, indeed. Well, Monza in turn 1, name a worse sentence combination, as they say in the English language. But still, congratulations on your results today. We do look forward to seeing you take to the Monza circuit in a week's time. And thank you very much, Paul Williams, for joining us in the interview room.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Have a lovely evening.
You too.
So hearing that from Paul Williams, very pleased with the results today, and you can hear that in his voice in terms of that joy he took in the race and say enjoying the multi-class racing upon his return, but also on top of that, the way he played it out. One of the philosophies that's very noticeable in the way Paul Williams talks about his race, and that is it's a case of it's measured racing, and we saw that in the sprint, where the fact he lost a number of places at the start, but he tried the recovery, albeit he did lose out in the run for P3 due to the GT3 traffic, but he was rather safe than sorry, and the same in the feature, played it safe at the start, lost some places, but in return stayed out of trouble, didn't pick up any damage, and just managed it through to the end, and just slightly dropped the ball coming out to turn 6 with 5 laps to go, but a small mistake which he was able to correct and come home in an unexpected second place. But some major points on the board for both Paul Williams and also for Team Tetra Rouge, and I think he's going to continue to surprise us with some brilliant results coming up through the field over the course of the remainder of the season. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is the conclusion of all of our post-round interviews for tonight. A little bit light on the field, but hopefully we'll have a couple more drivers for interview in a week's time. But until then, thank you very much for watching. And if you do want to know more about the Next Gen Racing community, why not check us out, our official website, that is nextgenracing.co.uk. Alternatively, if you are a Facebook user, you can always go to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/nextgenracing for further information. Also, a big thank you to our partners without whom we'd not be able to run Lobby 2 in this series, and that is IMB Racewear, their website imbracewear.com. But now we must pack up our bags and get ready to head to Monza for a week's time. Friday, the 27th of May 2022 is when we'll be bringing you all the racing action from Lobby 2. Of course, the racing will occur on the Wednesday of that week, on the 25th of May 2022, and well, it's Monza Turn 1. Do we need to say any more? Well, we do need to say a little bit more. A circuit built around low downforce, high speed, low drag, and plenty of heavy braking. It's going to be all about the slipstream and mastering the ability to carry speed through the chicanes and over the curves. And you can imagine that circuit, whilst it looks straightforward in practice, is going to be anything but simple. But until then, we'll just have to wait. And thank you very much for tuning in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We have been Next Gen Racing. I have been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, have a fantastic weekend. But most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.